Have you ever stood in a place where history feels alive? Where the air seems to whisper stories of people who walked there centuries ago, of civilizations that rose to greatness only to vanish into the mists of time. There's something deeply compelling about these forgotten worlds, kingdoms swallowed by jungles, cities buried beneath desert sands, entire cultures that left behind only fragments of their existence. It's as if the earth itself is keeping secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. That sense of mystery is what drives explorers, historians, and dreamers to search for what was lost. Think about it. We live in an age where satellites can map every inch of the planet, where technology lets us peer into the deepest oceans and the farthest reaches of space. And yet, there are still places, whole cities, that have slipped through the cracks of history, waiting silently for rediscovery. These aren't just ruins, they're time capsules holding clues to how people lived, loved, struggled, and triumphed. They remind us that human ambition is both powerful and fragile, that even the greatest empires can fade, leaving behind only echoes and enigmas. Today, we're setting out on a journey to uncover 30 of these lost cities, places that continue to captivate the imagination of the world. From legendary capitals mentioned in ancient texts to settlements that disappeared under mysterious circumstances, each one has a story that begs to be told. We'll traverse dense rainforests, brave arid deserts, and dive into underwater realms, all in pursuit of answers. This isn't just a history lesson. It's an invitation to adventure, to wonder, and to rediscover the thrill of the unknown. So come along, let's explore the mysteries together and see what forgotten treasures we might find. Our journey begins not with a city found, but with perhaps the most famous city ever lost, a legend that has captivated humanity for over 2,000 years. We're talking, of course, about Atlantis. The story of this fabled island nation first appears in the works of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato around 360 BC. He didn't present it as a myth, but as a historical account passed down through generations. According to his dialogues, Atlantis was a powerful and technologically advanced kingdom located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, placing it squarely in the vast, mysterious Atlantic Ocean. Plato described a paradise of immense wealth and sophistication. The city was built in concentric rings of land and water, connected by grand canals and tunnels large enough for ships to sail through. Its citizens enjoyed hot and cold running water, massive harbors teeming with vessels from across the globe, and a powerful navy that allowed them to conquer lands as far away as Africa and Italy. They constructed stunning temples plated in precious metals and celebrated a culture of wisdom and strength, but this greatness was corrupted by greed and ambition. Plato writes that the people of Atlantis began to seek power beyond their borders, attempting to subjugate the entire Mediterranean. It was then that the gods, angered by their hubris, sent a single terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods that caused the entire island to sink beneath the waves, vanishing forever. This dramatic end is why the legend endures. It's a classic tale of a golden age brought down by its own flaws, a moral warning that resonates deeply. For centuries, scholars, explorers, and adventurers have been desperate to find proof. Some theories suggest Atlantis was actually a memory of the Minoan civilization on the island of Thera, which was devastated by a colossal volcanic eruption around 1600 BC. Others propose locations as varied as the Azores, the Bahamas, or even Antarctica. There are those who believe its advanced technology hints at extraterrestrial influence, while more grounded historians think Plato might have been creating a philosophical allegory about the ideal state and its potential for failure, a story never meant to be taken as literal truth. The beauty of the Atlantis mystery is that it lives in that hazy space between history and folklore. The lack of concrete evidence hasn't dulled our fascination, it's only fueled it. This sunken city represents the ultimate archaeological puzzle, a ghost of a civilization that challenges what we think we know about our past. It asks us to consider what might be possible, what great societies might have risen and fallen long before recorded history began. And that question is the very thread that connects all the lost cities we'll explore. While Atlantis remains a powerful legend born from philosophical texts, our next lost city emerges from a living, breathing spiritual tradition. Off the western coast of India, in the modern state of Gujarat, lies a legend that is not just a story but a cornerstone of faith for millions. This is Dwarka, the ancient kingdom of the Hindu god Krishna, said to have been a magnificent city that vanished into the sea. Unlike Atlantis, Dwarka's story is not a singular account from one philosopher. It is woven deeply into the fabric of Hindu scripture, most prominently in the epic Mahabharata and the Puranas. These texts describe it in vivid detail, a glittering capital built on orders of Krishna himself, constructed from precious stones and adorned with vast palaces and wide, well-planned roads. It was a city of immense prosperity and power, a fortress that repelled attacks and served as the seat of a divine king. The scriptures also foretell its chilling end. Following Krishna's departure from the earthly realm, the great city is said to have been consumed by the ocean. The texts describe a catastrophic event where the sea rose and swallowed Dwarka whole, leaving no trace behind. For centuries, this was considered a powerful mythological allegory, a symbolic end to a divine era. But what if the waves off the coast of modern-day Dwarka are actually hiding a tangible truth? This question has driven a fascinating and ongoing quest that blurs the line between faith and archaeology. Since the 1930s, explorations have turned up pottery and artifacts on the shore that hinted at an ancient settlement. However, the real breakthroughs began in the 1980s with organized underwater excavations. Marine archaeologists have since uncovered structures that are nothing short of breathtaking. Submerged in depths ranging from just below the surface to over 100 feet, they have found the remains of massive stone walls, fortifications, and geometric structures that clearly indicate urban planning. They've recovered stone anchors used by ancient seafaring vessels and a plethora of pottery shards that have been carbon dated to around 1500 B. See a time frame that aligns intriguingly well with the traditional dating of the Mahabharata War. These aren't isolated findings, they point to a large, sophisticated port city that met a sudden and catastrophic end, likely due to rising sea levels or a massive seismic event. Naturally, these discoveries have ignited a passionate debate. For many devotees, this is definitive proof that the scriptures are historical records, validating a millennia-old belief. For a number of scientists and historians, the underwater ruins are undoubtedly evidence of a significant ancient Harappan or post-Harappan port city that was lost to the sea, but they caution against directly equating it with the celestial Dwarka of myth without more conclusive evidence. They argue that the real city may have inspired the legend, which was then magnified and deified over generations of storytelling. This intersection is what makes Dwarka so compelling. It stands as a powerful symbol of how myth and history can intertwine, where the spiritual and the scientific search for truth converge on the same stretch of ocean floor. It challenges us to consider that sometimes the most enduring stories are those anchored in a profound reality, waiting for the tides to recede and reveal their secrets. From the sunken spiritual kingdom of Dwarka, we travel across the globe to a legend born not from scripture, but from pure, insatiable greed. Our next destination isn't a city lost to natural disaster, but one that was perhaps never truly there to begin with, a phantom that lured men to their doom and reshaped a continent. This is the myth of El Dorado, the Gilded One. The story begins not with a city, but with a man. In the highlands of modern-day Colombia, the Muisca people had a magnificent ritual for inaugurating a new leader. The chosen king, or Zipa, would be covered from head to toe in adhesive resin before being blanketed in immense quantities of gold dust. He then became a living, breathing deity, El Dorado, the Golden One. Boarding a ceremonial raft laden with more gold and emeralds, he would journey to the center of Lake Guatavita. As his subjects cheered from the shores, he would plunge into the sacred waters, washing the gold from his body as an offering to the gods. This was the origin, a powerful and singular ceremony of immense wealth and spiritual devotion. But when Spanish conquistadors, their minds already feverish with the plunder of the Aztec and Inca empires, heard fragments of this tale, it warped beyond all recognition. They took the story of a golden man and transformed it into the dream of a golden city, a place where gold was so common it paved the streets and adorned every building, a kingdom of unimaginable riches just waiting to be claimed. This fantastical city, now named El Dorado, was placed on maps deep in the unexplored heart of the Amazon rainforest, a glowing beacon for every fortune hunter in the New World. What followed was one of the most tragic and futile chapters in the age of exploration. Over the course of 2 centuries, countless expeditions, fueled by avarice and desperation, plunged into the green hell of the Amazon. Men like Gonzalo Pizarro and Sir Walter Raleigh led thousands to their deaths, succumbing to disease, starvation, hostile tribes, and the unforgiving jungle itself. They dismantled empires and tortured locals for information, chasing whispers and fabricated maps that always promised the city was just beyond the next river. These quests achieved little more than the catastrophic destruction of indigenous cultures and the bankrupting of their European backers. They were searching for a phantom, a mirage of wealth that consumed them all. Today, the prevailing interpretation is that the Spanish, in their frantic search for the next great prize, fundamentally misunderstood what they were told. El Dorado was never a place, it was a person, and then it was an idea, a metaphor for the immense, untapped wealth of a continent that they were hell-bent on extracting. Modern archaeology has since shown that the real sources of this legend, cultures like the Muisca, did indeed possess spectacular gold-working traditions, but they lived in villages and towns, not a metropolis paved with gold. The true city of gold was the continent itself, and its real treasure was the vibrant, complex civilizations that the conquistadors were too blinded by greed to ever truly see. The legend endures as a stark cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession and the human tendency to hear only what we want to believe. Leaving behind the watery graves of Dwarka and the greedy mirage of El Dorado, our search for lost cities now takes us into the heart of one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, the vast, empty quarter of the Arabian Peninsula known as the Rub al-Khali. This is a sea of sand, a sun-scorched wilderness of towering dunes where temperatures soar to unimaginable heights. And here, deep within its silent, shifting sands, legends whisper of a magnificent metropolis that was punished for its arrogance and erased from the world. This is the story of Iram of the Pillars. The most famous account of Iram comes from the Quran, where it is mentioned as a cautionary tale. It was said to be the capital of the ancient Ad people, a tribe of giants who possessed immense strength and skill. They built a city of unparalleled splendor, with lofty towers and grand palaces supported by colossal pillars, a place of such wealth and power that its people believed they were invincible. They turned away from faith and towards idolatry, growing increasingly wicked and corrupt. Despite warnings from the Prophet Hud, they refused to repent. Their defiance invited divine wrath, and according to the scripture, a terrible, screaming wind was sent to blow against them for 7 nights and 8 days, utterly destroying the city and burying it beneath the sands, leaving no trace behind. This powerful narrative cemented Iram's place in Arabian folklore, a ghost city that served as a moral lesson for generations. For centuries, it was considered a myth, a story meant to teach humility. That is, until a fascinating piece of archaeological detective work in the early 1990s seemed to suggest there might be more to the legend. Using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, a team led by amateur archaeologist Nicholas Clapp identified what appeared to be the remnants of ancient caravan routes converging on a specific point in modern-day Oman. Following these ghost roads, they eventually uncovered the ruins of a significant settlement buried in the sands, a place now known as Ubar. The discovery was electrifying. Here was a fortified city that had once been a crucial hub for the frankincense trade, a source of immense wealth in the ancient world. Evidence suggested it met a catastrophic end when a large limestone cavern, which had been the city's primary source of water, collapsed, swallowing part of the fortress and causing the entire site to be abandoned and subsequently buried by the encroaching desert. Many news outlets and even some researchers heralded this as the discovery of the fabled Iram of the Pillars. However, the connection remains one of archaeology's most tantalizing maybes. While Ubar is almost certainly the real-world inspiration for the legend of Iram, the two are not necessarily one and the same. The Quran and folklore describe a city of godlike giants and impossible pillars, a place of supernatural punishment. Ubar, by contrast, was a prosperous but very human trading post that fell victim to a geological disaster. It's a classic case of a real event giving rise to an epic myth. The collapse of Ubar would have been a monumental, terrifying event for the people of the region, a story passed down through generations that likely grew in scale and symbolism, eventually evolving into the story of the mighty Ad people being smote by the heavens for their pride. Iram endures as a powerful symbol of the desert's ability to create and to conceal. It represents the intersection of faith, history, and geography. Whether it was a real city that was mythologized or a purely spiritual allegory, its legacy is cemented in the cultural memory. The endless sands of the Rub al-Khali continue to guard their secrets, leaving us to wonder if the true pillar-lined streets of Iram still lie buried somewhere, waiting for the next great storm to reveal them, or if its greatest power was always as a story, a timeless warning against hubris whispered on the desert wind. While the deserts of Arabia hold stories of divine retribution, the coast of Cornwall in England whispers a different kind of tale, one of tragic romance and chivalry forever tied to the legend of King Arthur. Here, in the realm of mythic heroes, we find the story of Lyoness, a land said to have stretched from the southwestern tip of England far out into what is now the Atlantic Ocean. This was not just any kingdom. It was described as a fertile and beautiful land, home to a noble people, and most famously, the tragic hero Tristan of the Arthurian romances. It was from Lyoness that Tristan journeyed to the court of King Mark of Cornwall, his uncle, and fell in love with the king's bride, Isolde, setting in motion one of literature's greatest and most sorrowful love stories. The legend tells us that this proud and prosperous land met a catastrophic end. After a great storm or a series of immense waves, the entire kingdom was swallowed by the sea in a single night. The stories speak of bells from drowned churches still ringing mournfully beneath the waves, a haunting sound heard by fishermen on quiet days. For centuries, this was considered a purely poetic invention, a fittingly dramatic and melancholic backdrop for the tales of chivalric love and loss. But what if this myth, like so many others, is rooted in a genuine geological memory? The fascinating connection lies in the geography of the area. Just off the coast of Cornwall lies the archipelago known as the Isles of Scilly. Today, these islands are a scatter of small, rocky outcroppings, but archaeological and geological evidence suggests they were once a single, much larger island, possibly even connected to the mainland during the last ice age. As the glaciers melted, sea levels rose dramatically, a process that continued for thousands of years. This slow but relentless encroachment of the ocean would have gradually, and sometimes suddenly, swallowed low-lying coastal settlements. The folk memory of watching your village, your fields, and your landmarks disappear under the rising tide could easily have been compressed and magnified over generations into the legend of a single, cataclysmic event that erased an entire kingdom. The name Lionis itself is likely a later, romanticized adaptation. Older Cornish folklore speaks of a lost land called Lethauso, and the Cornish language has a word, lies, which means court or palace. This linguistic evolution points to a real place whose importance was preserved in story long after its physical form vanished. The Isles of Scilly themselves provide tangible proof of ancient habitation. Submerged stone walls, old field boundaries, and ancient burial chambers now surrounded by water all testify to a time when people lived on land that is now beneath the sea. So, was Lionis the lush Arthurian kingdom of legend? In a literal sense, probably not. But was it a real place that inspired the legend? Almost certainly. The story of Lionis is a powerful example of how landscape and literature intertwine. It shows us that our oldest stories are often maps, charting not just the geography of a place, but the deep psychological impact of losing that place to the relentless forces of nature. The drowned land of Lionis lives on, not as a historical fact to be proven, but as a beautiful and melancholic echo of a very real process that shaped the world our ancestors knew, a ghost of a landscape preserved forever in verse and song. Leaving behind the misty legends of Lionis, we now journey to the sun-drenched shores of ancient Greece, where history often feels closer to the surface. Here we find not one, but two incredible cities that shared a similar watery fate, serving as stark reminders of the raw power of the Mediterranean. These are the twin tragedies of Helike and Pavloptri, one lost in a single, catastrophic night, and the other claimed by a much slower, yet just as final, embrace from the sea. Our story begins with Helike, a city that was, in its time, both powerful and deeply revered. Located on the Gulf of Corinth, Helike was the leading city of the Achaean League, a dominant political and economic force. But its true significance was spiritual. It was the primary center for the worship of Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes. The city was so important that it even founded colonies, including the famous city of Sybaris in southern Italy. For the ancient Greeks, Helike was a shining example of human achievement, a place of immense wealth and divine favor. And then, in the winter of 373 B.C., it was gone. Ancient historians like Strabo and Diodorus Siculus left us chilling accounts of that night. It began with animals acting strangely, fleeing to higher ground, a classic sign we now recognize as seismic activity. Then a massive earthquake struck, so violent that it shattered the very foundations of the city, but the horror did not end there. The earthquake triggered a colossal tsunami. A wall of water from the Gulf roared inland, completely submerging the ruins of Helike and every soul who had not escaped. For days afterward, the tips of the city's bronze statues could allegedly be seen just below the waves, a ghostly glimpse of the glory that had been erased. The destruction was so total that the city's exact location became a mystery for over 2,000 years, a legendary lost city that many searched for but none could find. It wasn't until the 1980s that archaeologists, combining clues from ancient texts with new geological surveys, began to zero in on the true site. The breakthrough came when they looked not on the coast but inland, realizing that centuries of silt deposits from nearby rivers had actually pushed the coastline kilometers outward, burying the ruins not underwater but under solid earth. Excavations finally revealed the remains of Helike's classical era colonnaded buildings, pottery, and coins, all encased in a layer of clay and seashells, the unmistakable calling card of a devastating tsunami. The discovery was a monumental achievement, proving that the ancient stories were not mere legend, but a sobering historical record. The city that worshipped the Earth Shaker had been utterly destroyed by the very forces it sought to appease. While Helike vanished in a single, violent event, the story of our next city, Pavloptri, is one of a much slower, almost gentle submersion. Located off the coast of southern Laconia in Greece, Pavloptri holds a unique and astonishing title. It is the oldest known submerged city in the entire world. This isn't a city that sank, it's a city that drowned, its ruins resting in just 10 feet of crystal clear water, so shallow that you can swim directly over its perfectly preserved streets. Dating back an almost incomprehensible 5,000 years, Pavloptri was already a thriving settlement during the Bronze Age, a contemporary of the early Minoans on Crete, long before the rise of classical Athens or Sparta. What makes Pavloptri so extraordinary is its state of preservation and its complete urban plan. Unlike ruins on land that have been plundered, built over, or eroded by centuries of weather, this city was protected by a blanket of sand and salt water. Underwater surveys led by the University of Nottingham have mapped a stunningly complete metropolis. We can see the entire layout of the city, its main streets, its alleyways, its public squares, its courtyards, and the foundations of dozens of buildings. Archaeologists have identified two-story houses, a clear hierarchy of larger and smaller structures suggesting social classes, and even what appears to be a complex water management system for storage and drainage. They've recovered thousands of artifacts, from pottery and tools to obsidian blades, that paint a vivid picture of a sophisticated society engaged in textile production, agriculture, and extensive trade across the Mediterranean. The prevailing theory is that Pavloptri's demise was caused by a series of gradual geological events, most likely local fault lines shifting and causing the land to sink slowly over centuries. This wasn't a sudden cataclysm, but a creeping inevitability. The rising sea levels that followed the last ice age eventually finished the job, gently flooding the streets and houses until the city was completely abandoned to the sea. This slow-motion disaster gave its inhabitants ample time to leave, taking their most valuable possessions with them, which is why the site lacks the dramatic hoards of treasure that fuel legends. Its value isn't in gold, but in knowledge. Pavloptri offers an unparalleled, almost frozen in time snapshot of daily life in the Bronze Age, a blueprint of an ancient city untouched by later civilizations. It allows us to walk, or rather swim, through a perfectly preserved moment in time, giving us a level of understanding about our prehistoric ancestors that no land-based ruin could ever provide. Together, Helike and Pavloptri represent two sides of the same coin. One shows us the terrifying, sudden power of nature that can wipe a vibrant city from the map in a single night. The other shows us the patient, inexorable force of the sea, claiming a community over generations. One was a dramatic legend proven true. The other is a silent, preserved museum that requires no legend to be awe-inspiring. They are both profound reminders that the ground beneath our feet and the water at our shore are in a constant, dynamic dance, and sometimes the most incredible chapters of human history are written not on land but just beneath the waves. From the clear Mediterranean waters that preserved Pavloptri's city plan, we now plunge into a world of an entirely different kind of obscurity, the dense, overwhelming green canopy of the Amazon rainforest. For centuries, the prevailing narrative was that this immense wilderness was a pristine, near-empty landscape, only sparsely populated by small, nomadic tribes. The idea that complex urban civilizations could have flourished here was dismissed as fantasy, the stuff of dangerous obsession. And no one embodies that obsessive quest more than the British explorer Percy Fawcett and his lifelong pursuit of a city he called simply Z. Fawcett was no amateur. A respected cartographer and archaeologist, he had undertaken several mapping expeditions for the Royal Geographical Society in the early 1900s. During these journeys, he became convinced by old Portuguese manuscripts and his own fragmentary findings, pieces of pottery, glimpses of what he thought were overgrown roads, that a sophisticated, ancient city lay hidden deep in the uncharted Brazilian jungle. He named it the City of Z, envisioning it as the capital of a lost civilization far older than the known indigenous cultures. In 1925, he embarked on his final expedition with his son and his son's best friend, vowing not to return without proof. They vanished without a trace, becoming one of the greatest exploration mysteries of the 20th century. Their disappearance only amplified the legend, casting a long shadow over the Amazon and branding the very idea of a lost city there as a fool's errand, a siren song that led even experienced men to their doom. For decades, Fawcett was seen as a tragic figure who had succumbed to his own delusions. The academic consensus held that the Amazon's poor soil, known as terra preta, could never have supported the large, sedentary populations needed to build cities. The jungle, it was said, was simply too hostile. But what if Fawcett wasn't entirely wrong? What if he was just looking in the wrong way? The breakthrough didn't come from a lone explorer cutting his way through the vines with a machete, but from technology that allowed us to see straight through the forest floor. The advent of LiDAR light detection and ranging has utterly revolutionized our understanding of the Amazon's past. This technology, which uses laser pulses shot from an aircraft to create a detailed 3D map of the ground below, has effectively peeled back the green curtain to reveal a hidden world. Recent surveys, particularly in the Bolivian Amazon and the Yupano region of Ecuador, have revealed astonishing, sprawling networks of urban settlements. We're not talking about a single lost city like El Dorado, but vast, interconnected complexes. The imagery shows neatly arranged platforms that were the foundations for large homes, massive ceremonial mounds, organized plazas, and most conclusively, an extensive web of straight, causeway-like roads connecting these centers across dozens of miles. These weren't temporary villages, they were planned, sophisticated societies that managed their environment on a grand scale. They engineered the land, creating causeways and canals, and cultivated the infamous terra preta soil themselves, enriching it over generations to make it incredibly fertile. These discoveries suggest that the pre-Columbian Amazon was not a wilderness, but a managed, humanized landscape that may have been home to millions of people. This new evidence has ignited a fierce and fascinating debate. On one side, some archaeologists and anthropologists argue that these findings completely rewrite the history of the Americas, suggesting a level of social complexity and population density in the Amazon that rivals more famous cultures like the Maya. They see these networks as evidence of true urbanism, a unique garden city model adapted to the tropical environment. On the other side, more cautious scholars urge against overstating the case. They agree the settlements were large and impressive, but question whether they should be classified as cities in the traditional, dense, monumental sense. They point out that the populations were likely more dispersed, organized around a network of smaller garden towns connected by ritual and trade, rather than a single, centralized urban core. What's truly compelling is how this modern discovery reframes Percy Fawcett's quest. He wasn't chasing a total fantasy, he was intuiting a truth that the technology of his time could not confirm. He was searching for a single, stone-built metropolis like those found in other parts of the world, and in that he may have been mistaken. But the reality that LiDAR is revealing, a continent-wide tapestry of interconnected settlements, a civilization built in harmony with the jungle rather than conquering it, is in many ways more incredible than his dream of a solitary city of gold. The real lost cities of the Amazon are not one mythical place, but hundreds of interconnected communities, a forgotten chapter of human achievement that is only now beginning to be read, revolutionizing our understanding of what this mighty rainforest once was and the people who called it home. But what if the Amazon wasn't the only rainforest hiding such secrets? What if another impenetrable jungle in a different part of the Americas was guarding a legendary metropolis of its own? Our search now takes us into the heart of Central America, to the dense, mist-shrouded rainforests of the Mosquitia region in Honduras. This is the setting for one of the most enduring legends of a lost city, a place known to explorers and indigenous people for centuries as Ciudad Blanca, the White City. The legend speaks of a vast settlement, a ceremonial center where the buildings themselves were said to be made of white stone, hence its name. Local indigenous tales passed down through generations described it as a place of immense wealth, the home of a powerful god who retreated into the jungle with his people, taking his treasures with him and leaving the city to be reclaimed by nature. For outsiders, the first major expedition to take these stories seriously was led by a flamboyant American adventurer named Theodore Maud in 1940. After months of hacking through the jungle, Maud returned claiming to have found the lost city. He spoke of immense ruins, vast plazas, and a giant statue of a monkey god. Most tantalizingly, he claimed to have found evidence of unimaginable golden treasures, but he refused to reveal the location, fearing it would be looted. He promised to return with a larger expedition, but he tragically took his own life before he could, and the precise coordinates of his discovery died with him, casting Ciudad Blanca back into the realm of myth. For decades, the jungle kept its secret. Then, in the 21st century, a powerful new tool entered the hunt, LiDAR technology. Just as it had revolutionized our view of the Amazon, it now pierced the canopy of the Mosquitia. In 2012, a team led by documentary filmmaker Steve Elkins and supported by the Honduran government conducted an aerial survey. The results were staggering. The LiDAR maps revealed, hidden beneath the unbroken green carpet, the unmistakable outlines of a vast urban landscape. It wasn't just a few structures, it was a complex network of plazas, earthworks, mounds, and an irrigation system, all belonging to a previously unknown civilization. The imagery was so compelling that it launched a ground expedition, which included renowned National Geographic archaeologist Chris Fisher. What they found on the ground in 2015 was beyond anyone's wildest expectations. In a valley they named the Valley of the Jaguar, the team uncovered a stunning array of artifacts and structures untouched for centuries. They didn't find buildings of white stone, but rather expertly carved stone sculptures emerging from the earth, left exactly where they had been placed when the city was abandoned. The most spectacular find was a ceremonial cache of over 500 objects, including intricately carved stone vessels, finely wrought metatess used for grinding ritual substances, and a magnificent, haunting head of a jaguar shaman, half human and half beast, representing a powerful spiritual transformation. These were not the scattered remnants of a small village. This was the ceremonial heart of a sophisticated society, a place of profound spiritual significance that was deliberately and orderly abandoned, its most sacred objects left behind as if in offering. The significance of this discovery, now often referred to as the City of the Jaguar, cannot be overstated. It provides undeniable proof of a complex pre-Columbian culture that flourished in a region historians had previously written off. The artifacts suggest a society with its own unique artistic style and spiritual beliefs, distinct from the well-known Maya to the north. The pristine condition of the cache is particularly important because it was never looted. Archaeologists can study the objects exactly as they were arranged, giving them priceless context about ritual practices and social hierarchy. This isn't just about finding lost treasure, it's about recovering a lost chapter of human history. The city's abandonment remains a mystery. Whether it was due to disease, warfare, or environmental change is still unknown. But its discovery validates centuries of indigenous knowledge and proves that some of the greatest stories, the ones that sound like myth, are often waiting on the edge of being proven true, if we only have the technology and the perseverance to look. Moving from the lush jungles of the Americas, we now travel to the golden sands of Egypt, a land whose ancient wonders are famous the world over. Yet, even here, in a country whose history has been meticulously studied, great cities have vanished, their stories buried by time and shifting landscapes. While the pyramids of Giza and the Valley of the Kings have long captured our imagination, the story of Tanis is a quieter, more mysterious tale of a capital city that simply disappeared, only to re-emerge in a discovery as dramatic as any work of fiction. Tanis presents us with a fascinating puzzle, one born from a case of profound mistaken identity. For many years, the great city built by the pharaoh Ramesses II, known as Pi Ramesses, was believed to be nothing more than a grand exaggeration described in ancient texts. That is, until modern archaeologists began to find evidence of a colossal city in the Nile Delta, complete with monumental statues, temples, and palaces inscribed with Ramesses' name. The initial belief was that this site, known as Tel el-Daba, was Pi Ramesses, but a problem emerged. Geological surveys revealed that the branch of the Nile that once flowed past this city had silted up and shifted eastward centuries after Ramesses' reign, making the location unusable as a major port and capital. So what happened to the glorious city? The answer is one of history's great acts of urban recycling. A powerful dynasty of pharaohs that came later, the 21st dynasty, faced with a dwindling river and seeking a strong capital in the north, simply packed up and moved. They didn't build a new city from scratch. They took the entire city of Pi Ramesses apart, stone by colossal stone, and transported it 40 kilometers to the northwest to a new site. They literally moved the capital, re-erecting the temples, palaces, and statues of their illustrious predecessor to adorn their own new capital, which they named Tanis. This act of pharaonic repurposing is the primary reason for the centuries of confusion. For a long time, scholars believed Tanis was Pi Ramesses. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The place was littered with statues and obelisks bearing the name of Ramesses the Great. It wasn't until the latter half of the 20th century that the painstaking work of archaeologists like Manfred Biotak and the geological evidence of the Nile's migration finally untangled the two cities, revealing Tanis for what it truly was, a new city constructed from the glorious handmade downs of an old one. This also gives Tanis a unique role in biblical scholarship. The Book of Exodus mentions the Israelites being forced to build the store cities of Pithom and Ramses. For generations, this was seen as a historical anchor point, with Ramses being identified as Pi Ramesses. The discovery that Tanis was built from the stones of Ramesses' city adds a compelling layer to this. It's possible that the biblical writers, living centuries after the events, knew of the great ruined city in the delta covered in the name of Ramesses and naturally associated it with the stories of their ancestors, even though the Tanis they might have known was built upon its remains. The real glory of Tanis, however, was not revealed until 1939, on the eve of a world war, by a French archaeologist named Pierre Montet. While excavating within the sacred temple precinct of the god Ammon, Montet's team made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the world of Egyptology. They uncovered an intact royal burial complex, not for one pharaoh, but for several Susens I, Amenemop, and Shoshenq II, among others. This was the first discovery of an unlooted pharaonic tomb since Howard Carter found Tutankhamun's in 1922, and in many ways it was even more significant. While Tutankhamun was a minor king buried in the relative backwater of Thebes, the tombs at Tanis were the final resting places of powerful pharaohs who ruled all of Egypt from their northern capital. And their treasures were breathtaking, because Tanis is located in the wet Nile Delta. Unlike the dry desert valley of Thebes, most organic materials like wood and leather had long since decayed. But the metals survived in spectacular fashion. Montet unearthed exquisite silver coffins, a material rarer than gold in ancient Egypt, stunning gold funerary masks of incredible craftsmanship, and breathtaking jewelry inlaid with lapis lazuli and other precious stones. The masterpiece was the solid silver sarcophagus and exquisite gold mask of Pharaoh Susens I, a find that rivals Tutankhamun's golden mask in its artistry and historical importance. Pierre Montet's discovery was monumental, yet it was tragically overshadowed. The world's attention in 1939 was understandably focused on the looming conflict in Europe, not on archaeological digs in Egypt. As a result, the treasures of Tanis never captured the public's imagination in the same way King Tut's did. They remain some of the most stunning artifacts in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, yet they are often missed by visitors who are unaware of their significance. Tanis itself stands as a testament to the fluid nature of history and identity. It was a city built from the legacy of another, a capital that rose to prominence only to be abandoned as the Nile continued its eternal shift, slowly burying its glories under the silt until a persistent archaeologist finally revealed its forgotten kings and their magnificent, silent treasure. Our journey through lost cities now takes a dramatic turn from the ancient world to a place whose destruction was witnessed, documented, and celebrated by some as an act of divine judgment. We traveled to the Caribbean in the late 17th century, to the coast of Jamaica, and to a city that was once the most notorious and vibrant port in the entire New World. This is the story of Port Royal, a place so infamous it was called the Sodom of the New World and the wickedest city on earth, a pirate haven that lived fast, died young, and was preserved in a watery grave. Port Royal's rise to infamy was a direct result of geopolitics and greed. After the English captured Jamaica from the Spanish in 1655, they quickly realized its strategic potential. Located on a natural harbor at the end of a long sand spit, it was the perfect base for the Royal Navy to control the Caribbean, but it became something far more lucrative. England was at war with Spain and actively encouraged privateering government-sanctioned piracy against enemy ships. Port Royal became the official home for these buccaneers. Men like the infamous Captain Henry Morgan used it as a base to launch devastating attacks on Spanish ports and treasure fleets, bringing unimaginable wealth back to be spent in the city's taverns, brothels, and gambling houses. The town exploded from a small outpost into a bustling, overcrowded metropolis of over 6,500 people. It was a place where vast fortunes could be made overnight and lost just as quickly. Gold, silver, and precious goods from across the Spanish Main flooded its markets, making it the commercial capital of the Caribbean and, for a brief, glorious moment, one of the wealthiest English colonies in the Americas. Life in Port Royal was a chaotic, violent, and extravagant spectacle. The streets were a dizzying mix of sailors, merchants, prostitutes, artisans, and enslaved Africans, all living under the shadow of the gallows where pirates were occasionally hanged as a public reminder of order. 2,000 buildings were crammed into 51 acres, with multi-story brick and timber structures leaning precariously over narrow lanes. Taverns like the famous Sign of the Bacchus did a roaring trade in rum and wine, while the sounds of raucous music and brawls filled the air day and night. It was a society built on extreme inequality, where a few fabulously wealthy merchants lived in luxury alongside a desperate underclass, all seemingly united in a collective pursuit of pleasure and profit. To the Puritan-minded in England and the American colonies, Port Royal was a symbol of everything corrupt and sinful about the colonial project, a modern-day Babylon that defied all notions of morality. Then, on the 7th of June, 1692, at exactly 11:43 in the morning, the party came to a cataclysmic end. It began with a low rumble that quickly grew into a violent earthquake, estimated today to have been a magnitude 7.5 or higher. The sandy soil on which the city was built underwent a process called liquefaction, instantly turning into a churning, watery quicksand. Brick buildings and stone forts simply sank straight down into the earth as the ground vanished beneath them. Then 3 massive tidal waves rolled in from the bay, completing the destruction. In a matter of minutes, 2/3 of the city, 33 acres, vanished beneath the waves. Over 2,000 people were killed instantly, and thousands more died in the ensuing days from injuries and disease. The disaster was so sudden and so complete that it was immediately interpreted by preachers on both sides of the Atlantic as God's punishment for the city's wickedness. Pamphlets and sermons spread the news with a kind of grim satisfaction, cementing Port Royal's legacy as a city that got what it deserved. For centuries, the sunken city was little more than a legend and a cautionary tale. But in the 1950s, archaeologists began to realize that the very disaster that destroyed Port Royal had also perfectly preserved it. The city had not been swept away, it had been submerged, and the layer of water and silt had created an anaerobic environment, preventing oxygen from decaying organic materials. This made the site one of the most important underwater archaeological digs in the world, a 17th-century time capsule frozen in a moment of catastrophe. Underwater excavations have yielded finds of breathtaking intimacy and historical value. Archaeologists have recovered buildings with their walls still standing, complete with preserved hearths and furniture. They have found leather shoes, intact pewter plates, Delftware jars still containing food, and hundreds of glass wine bottles. The personal effects of the city's inhabitants are everywhere. A pocket watch stopped at the exact moment of the earthquake, clay pipes, jewelry, and even a preserved loaf of bread. Perhaps the most significant discovery was not gold or silver, but the everyday reality of life. The digs have revealed the stark social divisions, from the well-built houses of the wealthy merchants to the cramped, makeshift dwellings of the poor. The preserved remains of a tavern, complete with barrels and drinking vessels, offer a direct window into the city's notorious social life. The archaeological record tells a more nuanced story than the simple tale of sin and punishment. It reveals a vibrant, complex, and functioning colonial city, a crucial hub of trade and military power whose sudden erasure provides an unparalleled snapshot of the Atlantic world at a precise moment in history. Port Royal's tragedy is our gain, offering a tangible connection to a past that is far more real and human than the pirate legends it inspired. But the iconic treasury facade is merely the grandest welcome mat for a city that sprawls far beyond what most visitors ever see. This is the hidden Petra, a capital of the Nabateans that, despite over 2 centuries of study, still holds profound secrets beneath its rose-red cliffs and desert sands. We know Petra was the brilliant heart of a vast trading empire, a nomadic Arab tribe that mastered the brutal economics of the ancient world. They controlled the lucrative incense routes, taxing caravans carrying frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. With that wealth, they didn't just carve tombs, they engineered a metropolis in the desert. The true genius of Petra lies not in its facades but in its gutters. In a region that receives barely 6 inches of rain a year, the Nabateans built an incredibly sophisticated water management system of dams, cisterns, channels, and ceramic pipes that could collect, store, and distribute every precious drop of water. This hydrological network allowed the city to support a population estimated at 30,000 people, complete with lush gardens, Roman-style baths, and public fountains, a miraculous oasis of abundance in the middle of an arid wilderness. Yet, for all we know about their engineering, we understand surprisingly little about the Nabateans themselves. They left behind thousands of inscriptions, but most are simple graffiti marking a name or a brief dedication. They had a rich culture and powerful kings, but no great libraries of their own literature have been found. Their history was largely written by their enemies and trading partners, the Greeks and Romans, leaving us with an outsider's perspective on this formidable civilization. This gap in understanding fuels the ongoing quest for Petra's lost elements. While over 1,000 monuments have been documented, archaeologists are certain more remain hidden. The famous tombs are carved into the main canyon walls, but what about the city where the common people lived? The vast majority of Petra's residential areas, the homes and marketplaces of its citizens, remain almost entirely unexcavated, buried under meters of sediment deposited by centuries of seasonal floods. These areas could hold the key to understanding daily life, social structure, and the true extent of the city's population. Then there is the mystery of the Nabatean royalty. Where are their tombs? The magnificent King's Wall, a towering cliff face featuring a row of impressive obelisks and monuments, is believed to be a royal necropolis, but no definitive royal burial has ever been identified within it. The tomb of the greatest Nabatean king, Aratus IV, who ruled at the height of Petra's power, has never been found. Could his final resting place, potentially laden with the wealth of the incense trade, still be sealed in a hidden chamber, untouched for 2 millennia? Modern technology is now providing tantalizing clues that much of Petra is still waiting to be discovered. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery have recently revealed evidence of a massive, previously unknown monumental structure buried entirely underground just half a mile from the city center. The scans show a large platform about the size of an Olympic swimming pool, flanked by a smaller internal structure and approached by a grand staircase. This isn't a tomb carved into a cliff. It's a freestanding building that was subsequently buried by sand and time, its purpose and contents completely unknown. Furthermore, surveys suggest that the main processional way through the center of Petra, the Sikh, is itself built over earlier structures, implying that entire layers of the city's development are sealed beneath the familiar paved road. Each of these findings suggests that the Petra we walk through today is merely the tip of the architectural iceberg. The story of this rock-cut city is far from complete. Every undiscovered cistern, every buried shop, and every potential royal tomb promises to rewrite our understanding of the Nabateans, transforming them from the shadowy masters of the desert trade into a fully realized civilization whose deepest secrets are still protected by the very sands that once enriched them. From the pirate dens of Port Royal and the rock-hewn wonders of Petra, we now venture onto one of history's most legendary highways, the Silk Road. This was not a single road, but a sprawling network of trade routes connecting the East and West, a conduit for silk, spices, ideas, and cultures. For centuries, caravans braved some of the most treacherous terrain on Earth, and their survival depended on a string of oasis cities that bloomed like miracles in the wilderness. Yet, the same forces that gave these cities life could also take it away. Our next lost cities are haunting examples of this delicate balance, the vanished oasis kingdoms of Lulan and Nia, swallowed by the most unforgiving desert on the planet, the Taklamakan. The very name Taklamakan is thought to translate from the Aigha language as the place of no return, and for good reason. This desert in what is now China's Xinjiang region is a vast sea of shifting sand dunes, a place of extreme temperatures, savage sandstorms, and near-total absence of water. For travelers on the Silk Road, the only way across was to skirt its deadly edges, hopping from one oasis to the next. These oases were more than just pit stops. They were full-fledged city-states, centers of commerce and culture where Chinese, Indian, Tibetan, and Central Asian influences mingled. Lulan and Nia were two of the most important of these way stations, and their stories are inextricably linked to the slow, suffocating advance of the desert sands. Our journey to rediscover them begins not with an archaeologist, but with a lone Swedish explorer named Sven Hedin. In 1900, while attempting to cross the Taklamakan, Hedin's expedition was on the verge of collapse, desperately short of water. By pure chance, his local guide stumbled upon the remains of wooden structures poking through the dunes. Hedin had found Lulan. What he uncovered was a ghost town preserved in stunning detail by the arid climate. There were houses, a government office, a magnificent stupa, and a Buddhist temple. But the most chilling finds were the human ones. The sand had naturally mummified the dead, leaving their bodies and clothing perfectly intact. One particularly famous mummy, known as the Beauty of Lulan, was so well preserved that her features and even the fine textiles she was buried in could be studied in incredible detail, dating back nearly 4,000 years. Alongside these silent sentinels of the past, Hedin found a treasure trove of documents written on wood and paper in the Kharosthi script, which detailed the mundane yet fascinating workings of the city, tax records, legal disputes, and personal letters. These texts proved Lulan was a bustling administrative center for the Chinese around the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, a crucial command post on the Silk Road. The story of Nia unfolded in a similar fashion. thanks largely to the relentless efforts of the Hungarian-British archaeologist Aurel Stein in the early 1900s. Following clues from ancient Chinese texts, Stein located the ruins of Nia deep in the desert. What he found was nothing short of magical. He excavated the remnants of a sophisticated settlement that was a fascinating cultural fusion. The buildings showed a clear Hellenistic influence, with ornate wooden columns and capitals that echoed Greek styles, likely a legacy of Alexander the Great's campaigns in Central Asia centuries earlier. Yet the people worshipped Buddha, and their official documents were written in the Indian Kharosthi script. Stein uncovered an entire abandoned estate, complete with its living rooms, kitchens, and orchards of ancient fruit trees that still stood, long dead and bleached by the sun. He also found beautifully crafted furniture, elaborate textiles, and most touchingly, a wooden document with a string still attached that once held the official clay seal, a moment of administrative business frozen in time. So why were these vibrant, cosmopolitan cities abandoned? The evidence points to a slow-motion environmental catastrophe. Both Lulan and Nia were utterly dependent on rivers flowing down from the distant Kunlun Mountains for their water. Over centuries, climate change and shifting weather patterns caused these glaciers to recede, reducing the water flow. At the same time, the city's own populations likely contributed to their demise through deforestation and overfarming, which accelerated the desertification process. As the water became scarcer, the irrigation channels that fed their fields and orchards ran dry. The sand dunes, always waiting at the doorstep, began their inexorable advance. It was not a sudden cataclysm, but a gradual, unstoppable suffocation that eventually forced the inhabitants to gather their most precious belongings and leave their homes to the desert, where they would lie perfectly preserved for over a millennium. Today, the work of uncovering these cities is more urgent and more challenging than ever. The same conditions that preserved them, the extreme dryness, now threaten them. As climate change and modern agriculture divert what little water remains, the desert is expanding even further, and the sites are being reburied by sand at an alarming rate. Furthermore, the political sensitivity of the Xinjiang region makes archaeological access difficult. The most fascinating and contentious aspect of these discoveries is the mummies themselves. Their European features, tartan textiles, and well-preserved bodies have sparked intense debate about the history of migration and ethnicity in the region, a topic that remains deeply politicized. The lost cities of the Silk Road are not just relics of the past, they are active archaeological sites that hold the keys to understanding how civilizations rise, adapt, and ultimately fall when their relationship with the environment breaks down. They stand as silent, sand-blown monuments to the fragility of even the most vibrant human enterprises in the face of a changing world. Yet even as the Taklamakan sands claim entire cities, another kind of legend persists, one not lost to environmental change but hidden by choice, awaiting a destined time. High in the frozen, inaccessible peaks of the Himalayas, beyond the realm of trade routes and desert kingdoms, lies a legend of a paradise that has never been lost because it was never meant to be found by the unworthy. This is the mystical realm of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom that represents not a fallen civilization, but a perfected one, a beacon of spiritual hope waiting for a world in its darkest hour. Unlike the cities we've explored, Shambhala's story does not begin in archaeology or history, but in ancient Buddhist texts, most prominently the Kalachakra Tantra. These scriptures describe Shambhala not as a mythical place, but as a real, physical kingdom hidden somewhere in the snow-capped ranges of the Himalayas. It is depicted as a verdant, lotus-shaped valley, shielded from the outside world by a ring of impassable mountains. Its capital, Kalapa, is said to be an architectural marvel of golden temples and pristine palaces, where the inhabitants live in perfect harmony, free from poverty, war, and old age. They have achieved a state of enlightenment guided by a lineage of enlightened kings, and possess profound wisdom and psychic powers. This is not a relic of the past, it is a society existing parallel to our own, watching and waiting. The most compelling aspect of the Shambhala prophecy is its role in a future cosmic battle. The texts predict that as the world descends into an age of greed, hatred, and conflict, a time known as the Kali Yuga, the 25th king of Shambhala, a ruler named Rudra Kakran, will emerge from seclusion. He will lead a mighty army of enlightened beings out of the hidden valley to defeat the dark forces plaguing the world, ushering in a new golden age of peace and wisdom. This narrative transforms Shambhala from a mere paradise into a spiritual arsenal, a reservoir of divine power held in reserve for humanity's most desperate need. This promise of a coming savior from a hidden land is what has fueled the quest for its physical location for centuries, captivating not just Buddhist monks but Western explorers, occultists, and even the Nazi regime, which sent expeditions to Tibet in the 1930s hoping to tap into this supposed source of Aryan power. The search for a tangible Shambhala has predictably led to a myriad of proposed locations. Some point to the remote and stunningly beautiful Hunza Valley in Pakistan, with its longevity claiming inhabitants and fertile orchards. Others suggest the hidden kingdom of Mustang in Nepal, or the unexplored gorges of the Tsangpo River in Tibet, a region so remote it was one of the last blank spots on the map. The Russian mystic Nicholas Roerich became obsessed with Shambhala in the early 20th century, leading a multi-year expedition through Central Asia, convinced he would find signs of the kingdom's proximity. Yet, for every seeker who claims to have felt its energy or seen its lights, there is the stark reality of the Himalayas, a brutally inhospitable terrain that has claimed the lives of many who searched for a paradise that always seemed just beyond the next pass. This leads to the most profound interpretation of Shambhala, that its true hiding place is not in the physical world at all, but within the human mind and spirit. Many Buddhist masters teach that Shambhala is a pure land, a state of consciousness achievable through intense meditation and spiritual practice. It is an allegory for the enlightened mind, a map for the inner journey toward compassion and wisdom that each individual must undertake. In this view, the prophesied war is not an external battle, but the internal struggle against one's own ignorance and negativity. The king who will lead the charge is the potential for enlightenment within every person. This doesn't invalidate the physical legend. Instead, it adds a deeper, more accessible layer to it. Shambhala becomes both a place and a state of being, a destination for the outer explorer and the inner pilgrim alike. Ultimately, the enduring power of Shambhala lies in what it represents, the eternal human hope for a better world. In the face of our own era's conflicts and crises, the idea that a hidden repository of peace and wisdom exists whether in a remote valley or in the depths of our own awareness offers a powerful antidote to despair. It is the ultimate utopian ideal, one that suggests perfection is not a forgotten chapter of history, but a potential future, patiently waiting for us to evolve enough to either find it or perhaps to become it. After the ethereal promise of Shambhala, we turn to a mystery rooted not in spiritual prophecy, but in a very tangible and equally elusive quest across the burning sands of southern Africa. This is the story of a lost city that captivated the Victorian world, a legend born from a showman's tale and sustained by the Kalahari Desert's unforgiving mirages. The search for this fabled ruin, often called the lost city of the Kalahari, is a fascinating study in how easily hope, imagination, and the tricks of light can conspire to create a legend where none may exist. The man who started it all was not a trained archaeologist or a seasoned explorer, but a Canadian entertainer named Guillermo Antonio Farini. Farini was a master of spectacle, a former tightrope walker, inventor, and promoter with a knack for capturing the public's attention. In 1885, after an expedition into the then largely unexplored Kalahari, he returned to London with an astonishing claim. he announced that he had discovered the ruins of a massive, ancient city hidden deep within the desert. He delivered a detailed lecture to the Royal Geographical Society and published a book, Through the Kalahari Desert, complete with drawings. His descriptions were vivid and convincing. He spoke of a vast horseshoe-shaped structure built of great stone blocks, some mortared together, with walls covered in mysterious hieroglyphics. He described a great archway, symmetrical passageways, and a floor made of large, flat stones. It was, he claimed, evidence of a sophisticated, pre-colonial civilization that had been swallowed by the sands. To a Victorian audience enthralled by the discoveries of Troy and Egypt, this was electrifying news. A lost city in the heart of Africa, it was the stuff of dreams. Naturally, Farini's account prompted others to try and find it. Over the decades that followed, a series of expeditions set out into the Kalahari, each hoping to confirm his discovery and claim the glory. The most famous of these was the $25,000 Lost City expedition, led by a South African pilot, Colonel James Donovan, in 1932. He mounted a serious, well-funded effort, even employing an aircraft to conduct an aerial survey of the vast, empty landscape. Other searches continued sporadically throughout the 20th century. Yet all returned empty-handed. No grand archways, no hieroglyphic-covered walls, no paved floors. The only things they found were more questions and the relentless, disorienting expanse of the desert. Doubt began to creep in. Had the brilliant showman Farini simply fabricated the entire story for publicity and book sales? Or had he seen something real but profoundly misinterpreted it? The most compelling modern theory points not to human construction, but to the powerful artistry of nature itself. Geologists and modern researchers who have retraced Farini's probable route believe he almost certainly encountered a remarkable natural geological formation known as a dolerite sill. These are igneous rock formations where magma has intruded horizontally between older layers of rock. Over millions of years, the softer surrounding sandstone erodes away, leaving the harder dolerite exposed. This process can create stunningly artificial-looking features, long, straight lines that resemble walls, blocks that appear perfectly squared, and even what look like paved floors. These formations often fracture at right angles, creating the illusion of masonry. When the sun is at a low angle, casting long shadows across these rocks, the effect is uncanny. To an eager eye, desperate to make a monumental discovery, especially the eye of a promoter like Farini, it would be incredibly easy to see a lost city in these natural cliffs. The hieroglyphics, he reported, were likely nothing more than natural weathering patterns, lichen growth, or prehistoric sand rock art, which is common in the region. The entire magnificent ruin was in all likelihood a spectacular desert mirage carved in stone. Despite this rational explanation, the myth has proven incredibly resilient. The idea of a lost city in the Kalahari continues to pop up in popular culture, in novels, documentaries, and online forums. It taps into a deep and enduring fascination with the idea of a forgotten civilization in Africa, one that existed outside of the well-documented Egyptian and Zimbabwean context. It speaks to our desire for the landscape to hold grand, hidden secrets. The legend persists because it is a good story, and because the Kalahari itself is so vast and impenetrable that it feels like it could be hiding something. That sliver of doubt, that possibility that one lone aerial survey might finally spot the crumbling walls, is enough to keep the dream alive. The lost city of the Kalahari endures not as an archaeological site, but as a powerful testament to the human capacity for wonder, and a cautionary tale about the fine line between discovery and delusion in the world's most mysterious places. But our search for sunken worlds is far from over, and it next takes us to the westernmost tip of Japan, to the waters off the small island of Yonaguni. Here, a discovery so strange and visually stunning has ignited a fierce debate that pits mainstream science against a tantalizing, alternative vision of human history. Resting just 16 feet below the surface lies the Yonaguni Monument, a massive, enigmatic sandstone formation that looks for all the world like a sunken, stepped pyramid or a grand ceremonial complex. Discovered by a local diver in 1986, the structure is immense, measuring roughly 500 feet long, 130 feet wide, and 90 feet tall. Its most striking features are its sharp, clean edges and its perfectly parallel right angles. It appears to have wide, flat terraces, what look like staircases leading to a central plaza, and two towering pillars that seem purposefully placed. It is a breathtaking sight, a piece of architecture that feels both alien and strangely familiar, a grand ruin from a time we cannot remember. The debate over its origins is a classic collision between geology and archaeology. On one side, mainstream geologists like Professor Robert Schoch of Boston University argue that the Yonaguni Monument is a spectacular example of natural sandstone weathering. The rock in this region is heavily fractured along natural plains and is subjected to powerful underwater currents that can erode it in remarkably straight lines and sharp angles. They point to similar formations on land nearby, which also feature these clean, stepped appearances created entirely by natural forces. The proponents of this view insist that while the monument is astonishingly geometric, every single one of its features can be explained without human intervention. They see a marvel of nature that our pattern-seeking brains are eager to interpret as something more. On the other side of the argument are researchers like Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus who has spent decades studying the site. After countless dives, Kimura became convinced that the structure is at least partially man-made. He points to specific features that he argues are impossible to create through natural processes alone. These include what appear to be carved animal reliefs on one wall, a precise star-shaped design on a rock, and a perfectly circular depression that looks like it was designed to hold a pillar. He also notes that the roads leading to the structure are paved with smaller stones, a classic sign of human construction. For Kimura and his supporters, the scale, symmetry, and specific details of the monument are simply too complex to be a random act of nature. They believe they are looking at the remains of a vast, drowned city, perhaps 5,000 years old, that was submerged by a catastrophic rise in sea levels at the end of the last ice age. This theory inevitably pulls the Yonaguni Monument into the orbit of one of the Pacific's greatest legends, the lost continent of Mu. First proposed in the 19th century by Augustus Le Plongeon and later popularized by writer James Churchward, Mu was described as a vast Pacific civilization, a kind of Atlantis of the East that sank beneath the waves thousands of years ago. Proponents of the man-made theory suggest Yonaguni could be a surviving outpost of this forgotten world, a tangible piece of evidence that a sophisticated culture once thrived in a region that is now deep underwater. It's a compelling narrative that connects a physical discovery to a grand, mythical story, offering a possible explanation for who could have built such a structure and why it ended up submerged. Yet the scientific community remains overwhelmingly skeptical. The lack of any associated artifacts, no pottery, no tools, no human remains, is a significant stumbling block. If this was a bustling city or a ceremonial center, we would expect to find the cultural debris of its inhabitants scattered across the ocean floor. So far, none has been conclusively identified and linked directly to the monument's construction. The carvings could be natural tool marks from fishing equipment or random scouring by rocks carried in strong currents. The debate ultimately hinges on a fundamental question. Are we seeing the intentional handiwork of ancient architects, or are we witnessing the incredible, almost artistic power of natural geology? The Yonaguni Monument stands as a powerful Rorschach test at the bottom of the sea. For some, it is undeniable proof of a lost chapter in human history. For others, it is the world's most magnificent natural wonder, until definitive evidence is found, a tool embedded in the rock, an unmistakable inscription, or a clearly man-made artifact in situ. The mystery will persist, a haunting and beautiful enigma that challenges our understanding of both nature and the forgotten potential of our own ancestors. From the enigmatic underwater structures of Yonaguni, we now sail westward into the heart of the ancient Mediterranean, a sea that was once the bustling crossroads of the world's earliest superpower traders. Long before Rome laid claim to this watery domain, a different people, the Phoenicians, mastered its waves. Hailing from the coastal strip of modern-day Lebanon, these intrepid merchants were the great connectors of the ancient world, and their legacy is written not in grand imperial conquests, but in a scattered network of trading posts and colonies that stretched from the Levant all the way to the Atlantic shores of Spain and Morocco. Yet for all their influence, many of their greatest settlements have been lost to time, warfare, and the relentless sea, leaving behind a puzzle of sunken ports and razed cities waiting to tell their story. Our journey begins with the most famous of all Phoenician foundations, a city whose name became synonymous with wealth, power, and a hatred so profound its enemies swore to erase it from the earth, Carthage. But before Carthage rose to challenge Rome, its mother cities in Phoenicia itself met their own dramatic fates. Great ports like Tyre and Sidon were legendary for their wealth and maritime prowess. The Bible speaks of Tyre's traders as princes and its merchants as the honored of the earth, but their success made them a target. The most famous assault was by Alexander the Great in 332 B.C. Determined to capture the island city of Tyre, which was considered impregnable, Alexander embarked on one of the most audacious military engineering projects in history. His army spent months building a massive causeway, a mole, from the mainland to the island, using the very rubble of the old mainland city they had destroyed. After a brutal 7-month siege, Alexander's forces broke through, unleashing a terrible slaughter. Thousands were killed and thousands more were sold into slavery. The city was broken, and though it would later be rebuilt, it never regained its former glory. While the modern city of Sur in Lebanon stands on the site today, the grand Phoenician port of Tyre now lies largely submerged just offshore. Underwater archaeologists have mapped its remains, finding ancient harbors, warehouses, and fortifications slowly being claimed by the Mediterranean, a silent testament to its former greatness and the brutal cost of defying an empire. From the ashes of these mother cities, the Phoenician diaspora spread west, establishing colonies that would become powers in their own right. One of the most intriguing and long-lived of these outposts is Lixus, on the Atlantic coast of modern-day Morocco. According to legend, this was the site of the mythical Garden of the Hesperides, the fabled orchard where golden apples grew guarded by a dragon. In reality, Lixus was a crucial factory for garum, the famously pungent fermented fish sauce that was the ketchup of the ancient Roman world. Established in the 8th century BC, the city was a layered cake of civilizations occupied first by Phoenicians, then Carthaginians, then Romans, and finally Byzantines. Its ruins today include a vast Roman amphitheater with sweeping views of the Laukos River and the Atlantic, and intricate mosaic floors depicting sea gods, a nod to the oceanic wealth that built the city. Yet for all its apparent presence, much of Lixus's earliest history, its foundational Phoenician layer, remains buried and poorly understood, a common fate for these ancient trading hubs where later Roman construction often obscures the original Phoenician footprints. But the story of these seafaring people takes its most dramatic turn with the rise of their greatest colony, Carthage itself, and its cataclysmic fall. Founded by Phoenician settlers from Tyre in the 9th century BC, Carthage grew to dominate the western Mediterranean, controlling trade routes, establishing its own vast network of colonies, and amassing incredible wealth. Its rivalry with the rising Roman Republic culminated in the 3 Punic Wars, a series of conflicts so devastating they shaped the course of Western history. After finally defeating the brilliant Carthaginian general Hannibal, Rome was consumed by a desire for total vengeance. The statesman Cotto the Elder famously ended every speech in the Roman Senate with the phrase, "Ceterum censeo Carthaginem est delendum." Furthermore, I consider that Carthage must be destroyed. In 146 BC, the Romans made good on this threat. After a grueling siege, legions under Scipio Aemilianus broke into the city. Street-by-street fighting lasted for nearly a week before the great citadel, the Biasa Hill, fell. The surviving 50,000 citizens were sold into slavery, and then the Romans methodically tore the city apart. Legends say the fields were sown with salt so nothing would ever grow again, though historians debate the literal truth of this. What is certain is that the city was set ablaze and razed with such thoroughness that for generations its very location was almost forgotten. The magnificent harbors, the legendary libraries, the temples and homes all were reduced to rubble and lost to history. For centuries, Carthage lay dormant, a ghost on the coast. It was only in the late 19th century that archaeologists began to piece together its remains. Today, the site on the outskirts of modern Tunis is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it is a challenging one to interpret. The Romans later built their own city directly on top of the ruins, meaning most of the visible structures are Roman, not Punic. The true Carthage, the Phoenician capital, lies buried beneath. The most evocative discoveries haven't been grand buildings, but the Soma Tophet, a sacred precinct containing the urns of thousands of young children, which some scholars believe points to the Carthaginians' controversial practice of child sacrifice, though this remains a topic of intense academic debate. The city's once great circular and rectangular military harbors are now just green, placid pools, their outlines still clearly visible from the air, but their martial purpose long vanished. The quest to understand the Phoenician and Carthaginian world is increasingly moving underwater. Their cities were coastal, and rising sea levels and seismic activity have submerged many of their key ports. Marine archaeologists are now using advanced technology to map these sunken landscapes. Off the coast of Sicily, the island of Motia was a key Carthaginian stronghold until it was sacked by the Greeks. Its underwater causeway and submerged structures reveal a city under constant threat. In Spain, the ruins of the Phoenician trading post of Doña Blanca lie hidden under centuries of silt, its secrets preserved but inaccessible. Each of these sites offers a fragmented piece of a vast commercial network that moved not just goods but ideas, alphabet, art, and culture across the ancient world. The true lost cities of the Phoenicians and Carthaginians are not just the physical settlements destroyed by Rome or swallowed by the sea. They are the lost connections, the forgotten trade routes, the everyday stories of the merchants and sailors who bound the Mediterranean together centuries before the Caesars. Their history was written by their enemies, leaving us with a portrait of a cunning and sometimes cruel mercantile empire. Archaeology is now the key to rediscovering their own voice, to understanding them not as the villains of Roman history, but as one of the most influential and widespread cultures of the ancient world, whose maritime legacy of exploration and connection truly built the foundations of the world we know today. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific, far from the submerged harbors of the ancient world, lies a city so utterly alien in its construction and setting that to see it is to question everything you know about the limits of human ambition. This is Madol, a ghostly metropolis of stone built not on solid ground but atop a coral reef, a maze of over 90 artificial islands shrouded in steaming mangrove jungle and surrounded by the tidal channels of Micronesia. It is a place that feels less like a ruin and more like a mirage, a vision of a forgotten age of giants and magic, and it stands as one of the most enigmatic and visually staggering archaeological sites on the planet. The sheer scale of its construction defies belief. The islands themselves are platforms painstakingly built by stacking countless basalt crystals hauled from the other side of the island of Pohnpei. The builders used two types of stone: enormous columnar basalt logs, some weighing up to 50 tons, and immense boulders of prismatic basalt, a naturally occurring geometric rock that looks like it was shaped by some divine hand. These stones were stacked in a crisscross fashion, like a child building with giant Lincoln logs to form stable retaining walls. The interiors were then filled with coral rubble to create stable, elevated land where none existed before. The total volume of stone moved is estimated to be over 750 million tons. The logistics of this project are mind-boggling. How did they transport these colossal stones across the island, through dense jungle and treacherous terrain, without the wheel, without metal tools, and without draft animals? Local legend offers a supernatural explanation that the great sorcerers who founded the city, Olasipa and Olasopa, used magic to levitate the stones through the air, making them light as feathers. Modern engineers, humbled by the task, can only speculate about a combination of rafts, ropes, rollers, and an immense coordinated human effort that must have consumed generations. This labyrinth of man-made islets was the ceremonial and political seat of the Sordelor dynasty, a line of rulers whose name translates ominously to Lords of Delor. According to oral histories, the Sordelors unified the people of Pohnpei for the first time, but their rule grew increasingly oppressive and cruel. They centralized all power, demanding tribute from every corner of the island and enforcing their will with an iron fist. Madol, whose name means the spaces between, referring to the intricate network of canals that functioned as its streets, was the ultimate symbol of their absolute authority. It was a city reserved for the elite, the priests, the nobles, and the Sordelor himself. Commoners were forbidden from even entering without permission, adding to its aura of imposing, inaccessible power. At its heart was the mortuary sector, Nandorwas, a fortress-like compound with walls towering over 7 meters high, built to house the tomb of the Sordelors. This sacred space, accessible only by a narrow underwater entrance, was designed to protect their remains for eternity and to showcase their divine right to rule. Yet, for all its imposing grandeur, the city was profoundly vulnerable. Life on an artificial island is precarious. There was no source of fresh water and no soil for growing food. Every drop of water and every morsel of sustenance had to be ferried in by canoe from the main island, a testament to the immense logistical control of the Sordelors. This dependence, however, became their Achilles' heel. Around the 16th or 17th century, the dynasty fell. The legends say a hero named Isoclecal, raised from birth to be their downfall, led a rebellion and overthrew the last tyrant. With the central authority shattered, the elaborate system of tribute that sustained Madol collapsed. The city, utterly reliant on this external support, was simply abandoned to the jungle and the sea. The canals that were once highways for royal canoes became choked with mangroves, and the soaring walls that echoed with ritual chanting were left to the whispers of the wind and the cries of seabirds. Today, Madol is a place of overwhelming atmosphere, often called the Venice of the Pacific, though that comparison fails to capture its haunting, otherworldly presence. The ruins are slowly being strangled by the roots of banyan trees and battered by tropical storms, a poignant reminder of nature's ultimate reclaiming of even our most audacious creations. The mysteries are far from solved. Who were the Sordelors really? Were they native Pohnpeians or outsiders who brought new ideas and technology? What specific rituals were performed in its damp, dark enclosures? The site challenges our understanding of ancient Pacific navigation and social organization, proving that megalithic ambition was not unique to the Egyptians or the Incas. It stands alone, a silent, stunning monument to human ingenuity and ultimate folly, a city built on water and sustained by power that vanished as soon as that power was challenged, leaving behind a maze of stone secrets waiting to be fully understood. Leaving behind the stone canals of Madol, we now set our course for one of the most elusive and poetic legends of the Sahara, a fabled paradise known not for its stone monuments, but for its life-giving waters and the sweet song of birds. This is Zerzura, a name that translates enchantingly to Oasis of Little Birds, a lost city whispered about in ancient texts and Bedouin folklore for centuries, hidden somewhere in the vast, trackless ocean of sand that is the Libyan desert. Unlike the grand ruins of Petra or the sunken ports of Carthage, Zerzura's allure is softer, more ethereal. It is a vision of a white-walled city slumbering beneath the shade of palm trees, its gates closed and guarded by silent giants, where a cool spring flows and vineyards heavy with fruit promise respite from the sun's relentless fury. The first written mentions of Zerzura appear in a 15th-century Arabic treasure hunting manual, a text that itself reads like something from a tale of wonder. It describes the city as a place of untold wealth, its buildings made of white stone, its doors carved from a precious substance, its treasures watched over by those silent black-skinned guardians. But for the nomadic Bedouin tribes who have crossed the Sahara for generations, Zerzura was more than a treasure map. It was a part of their oral geography, a real place that existed just beyond the known dunes, a destination that could be found only by those who knew the desert's most secret paths or who were led there by fortune after being lost in a sandstorm. These stories gave the legend a tangible quality, a specific location that shifted with every telling but never quite vanished from the collective imagination. This potent mix of written mystery and oral tradition proved irresistible to the explorers of the early 20th century, a time when the world's blank spaces were rapidly disappearing. The quest for Zerzura became the driving force behind some of the last great romantic expeditions into the unknown. It captivated a group of intrepid men who would become known as the Zerzura Club, including the Hungarian Count Laszlo Olmosy, who would later be immortalized as the fictional English patient, and the British explorers Ralph Bagnold and Patrick Clayton. Armed with primitive automobiles and an unshakable determination, they embarked on a series of daring journeys across the Great Sand Sea, a terrifying expanse of dunes the size of a country. Their expeditions were feats of incredible endurance, navigating by sun compass and battling choking Khamsin sandstorms, all in pursuit of a dream. Olmosy, in particular, became obsessed, convinced that the lost oasis was hidden in a group of then uncharted depressions in the desert. Their searches, while ultimately unsuccessful in finding a city of white walls, yielded discoveries of a different and profound kind. They didn't find Zerzura, but they found something arguably just as significant, a chain of previously unknown oases, and most breathtakingly, the Cave of Swimmers in the Gilf Kebir Plateau, with its ancient rock art depicting people swimming in a verdant landscape that proved the Sahara had once been a green and fertile land thousands of years ago. In a way, they had found the ghost of Zerzura, not a single city, but the evidence that the entire region had once been capable of supporting such lush havens. The desert had indeed swallowed worlds, just not in the way the legend described. So why does Zerzura remain undiscovered, even in our modern age of satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar? The answer lies in the very nature of the legend itself. Many historians and archaeologists now believe that Zerzura was never a single, fixed city in the traditional sense. The descriptions of a white-walled town closely match known, real oases like Kufra or Dacca, which would have seemed like miraculous islands of life to a parched and weary traveler. The legend likely evolved as a way to make sense of these rare and scattered places, their locations becoming exaggerated and blurred over countless retellings around campfires. Furthermore, the desert is a dynamic, living entity. Sand dunes can travel for miles, completely burying small settlements or springs in a matter of years. A small oasis community abandoned due to a shifting water table could be entirely erased by the sands within a few generations, leaving no trace for even our most advanced technology to detect from space. Zerzura endures not as a place to be found on a map, but as a powerful symbol. It represents the ultimate refuge, the hope for salvation that lies just over the next dune in the face of certain peril. It is the desert's greatest seduction, a mirage built not of light but of story. The real treasure of Zerzura was never the gold behind its silent gates, but the spirit of adventure it ignited in those who dared to search for it, pushing the boundaries of exploration and revealing the deep, green past of the world's most arid wilderness. The oasis of little birds may forever remain just out of reach, a beautiful and necessary mystery that reminds us some secrets are meant to be cherished, not solved. Shifting from the sun-baked legends of Saharan oases, we find a tale of a different kind of watery grave, one born not of sand, but of salt and storm in the cold, churning waters of the Baltic Sea. This is the story of Vinter, a legendary trading metropolis of the early Middle Ages, a place of such immense wealth and sin that it was said the sea itself rose up to swallow it whole as punishment for its arrogance. For over 1,000 years, the ghost of this sunken city has haunted the coasts of Poland and Germany, a powerful myth woven from threads of history, folklore, and the ever-present danger of the northern waves. The legend of Vinter, sometimes called the Atlantis of the North, is rich in detail and moral warning. Medieval chroniclers described it as the largest and wealthiest city in all of Europe, a bustling hub where Slavic, Saxon, and Scandinavian traders mingled. Its 12 gates welcomed merchants from across the known world. Its markets overflowed with priceless luxuries like wine, silk, and spices, and its citizens lived in unparalleled opulence. But this prosperity bred a terrible pride and decadence. The stories tell of inhabitants who became so corrupt that they would pave their streets with gold to show off their wealth, use precious loaves of white bread as baking stones, and even fit their dogs with silver collars. Most shockingly, they were said to be morally bankrupt, given to every vice imaginable. According to the tales, their wickedness finally reached a tipping point and divine wrath was unleashed. A colossal storm surge sent by an angered god overwhelmed the city's defenses in a single night, dragging every magnificent building and every sinful soul to the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Fishermen in later years claimed that on quiet days they could still hear the faint, mournful sound of the city's church bells ringing beneath the waves, a constant reminder of the price of hubris. But where does myth end and history begin? The fascinating truth is that Vinter is almost certainly based on a very real and very powerful medieval trading center. The most compelling candidate is the ancient Slavic port of Wollin, located on an island at the mouth of the Oder River in modern-day Poland. Wollin, known to German chroniclers as Jumny and to the Vikings as Jomsborg, was a major economic and military power between the 9th and 12th centuries. Contemporary accounts from travelers like the Arab merchant Ibrahim ibn Yaqub describe a vast city with thousands of inhabitants, a bustling multi-ethnic population, and a formidable fleet. It was a key node in the lucrative trade routes connecting Western Europe, the Viking world, and the Byzantine Empire. Archaeological excavations at Wollin have proven it was indeed a massive settlement for its time, with extensive workshops, fortifications, and evidence of great wealth. The city's decline was likely more gradual than the legend suggests, caused by a combination of shifting trade routes, political conflicts, and the rising dominance of nearby competitors like Lübeck and Szczecin. However, its eventual abandonment, coupled with the very real and constant threat of coastal erosion in the region, provided the perfect ingredients for a dramatic legend of divine retribution to take root. This has not stopped the search for a literal, sunken Vinter. For generations, treasure hunters and researchers have scoured the Baltic coast, particularly around the German island of Usedom, where local folklore strongly places the city. The village of Bath even has a Vinter museum dedicated to the legend. Underwater archaeologists have surveyed the seabed, and while they have found evidence of submerged prehistoric settlements and ancient forests proof that sea levels have indeed changed and claimed land, no definitive trace of a major medieval urban center has been discovered intact beneath the waves. The most likely explanation is that the legend is a composite, a powerful story that condensed the very real history of several prosperous coastal trading towns like Wallen, Ralswiek on Rügen, and Menslin into a single, idealized and doomed metropolis. The enduring power of Winter lies in its cultural resonance. For the Germanic peoples, it became a symbol of a lost golden age, a Nordic's Atlantis. For the Slavic peoples, it represented the might and sophistication of their pre-Christian ancestors. The story served multiple purposes. It was a thrilling moral fable about the dangers of greed, a way to explain the mysterious ruins and artifacts that occasionally washed ashore, and perhaps a folk memory of very real and catastrophic storm floods that did indeed periodically devastate the low-lying coastal settlements of the Baltic. The legend was so potent that it inspired countless works of art, literature, and music throughout the 19th century, becoming a touchstone of romantic nationalism. Winter is more than a lost city. It is a mirror reflecting our ancient fears of the sea's power and our timeless fascination with the idea that great wealth, if not tempered by virtue, contains the seeds of its own destruction. It reminds us that the line between a bustling port and a legendary ruin is often as thin as the coastline itself, forever vulnerable to the next great storm. Machu Picchu may be the crown jewel of Inca archaeology, the postcard-perfect city in the clouds that draws millions of visitors each year. But this famous site represents only a single chapter in a much larger and far more mysterious story of resistance and retreat. The true final act of the Inca Empire was not written among its polished stone terraces, but in the treacherous, cloud-veiled valleys and tangled jungles further to the east, where the last free Inca rulers made their final stand against the relentless Spanish conquest. This is the story of two legendary lost cities, the historical refuge of Vilcabamba and the mythical paradise of Paititi, one representing the heartbreaking end of an empire, and the other representing a dream of a golden future that may still be waiting to be found. Our journey begins with the well-documented yet still elusive history of Vilcabamba. When the Spanish conquistadors captured the Inca Emperor Atahualpa in 1532, they believed they had broken the back of the empire. But the Inca resistance was far from over. A nobleman named Manco Inca initially cooperated with the Spanish, even being installed as a puppet ruler. However, he soon realized their true intent was total subjugation, and in 1536 he led a massive, bloody revolt, laying siege to the Spanish in Cusco itself. When the siege failed, Manco made a strategic and brilliant retreat. He led his remaining loyal followers northwest from Cusco, deep into the rugged, forest-covered mountains of the Vilcabamba region. Here, in a valley protected by sheer geography, he established a new capital, a neo-Inca state that would remain the last independent bastion of Inca rule for another 36 years. This new capital was also called Vilcabamba, and it became a beacon of hope and a center of defiance. From this remote redoubt, Manco and his successors, Titu Cusi Yupanqui and Tupac Amaru, launched guerrilla attacks on Spanish supply lines and settlements. The Spanish chronicles of the time describe it with a mixture of frustration and awe. They called it the refuge of the idolatrous Indians, a place where the old gods were still worshipped and the ancient ways endured beyond their reach. For decades, Vilcabamba was a thorn in the side of the Spanish crown, a symbol that their conquest was not yet complete. Finally, in 1572, a large Spanish force fought its way into the valley, captured the last emperor, Tupac Amaru, and brought him back to Cusco for a public execution. With his death, the final flicker of the Inca Empire was extinguished. The Spanish then systematically destroyed Vilcabamba, burning its buildings and scattering its population, hoping to erase it from memory and from the map. And for centuries it worked. the location of this last capital faded into legend, becoming just another lost city. The modern quest to find the real Vilcabamba is a tale of historical detective work. For a long time, many, including the famous American explorer Hiram Bingham, believed that Machu Picchu itself was the lost Vilcabamba. It wasn't until the 1960s that another explorer, Jean Savoy, and later the Norwegian adventurer Thor Heyerdahl, argued for a different site known as Espiritu Pampa, meaning plain of the spirits. Located in a hot, humid lowland valley, Espiritu Pampa was a much more difficult site to reach and far less visually spectacular than Machu Picchu. Its ruins were not of gleaming white granite, but of dark, moss-covered stone almost entirely reclaimed by the jungle. However, the evidence was overwhelming. Archaeologists found the remains of over 400 buildings, including a large ceremonial platform, and most conclusively, artifacts of clear Spanish origin nail fragments, horseshoes, and distinctive olive jars, proving this was a site occupied during the period of contact and resistance. The discovery confirmed that the last Inca capital was not a mountain-top citadel, but a jungle hideaway, a practical and strategic choice for a kingdom in its final, desperate days. But even as we found the historical Vilcabamba, an even grander legend persisted, one that predated the Spanish conquest. This is the story of Paititi, the Golden Promised Land. Unlike Vilcabamba, Paititi is shrouded in the mists of myth. The stories say it was a fabulously wealthy city, perhaps even the original homeland of the Inca, located somewhere east of the Andes in the vast Amazon rainforest. It was described as a place where the buildings were plated in gold and the priests performed rituals with enormous golden discs. When the Spanish arrived, these tales merged with their own thirst for treasure, and Paititi became the South American equivalent of El Dorado, a legendary city of gold that drove countless expeditions to their doom in the relentless jungle. For modern explorers, the search for Paititi is the ultimate challenge. The area where it is suspected to lie, where the high Andes fall away into the Amazon basin, is one of the most remote and difficult terrains on Earth. Expeditions must contend with sheer mountain passes, treacherous rivers, dense vegetation that can swallow a trail in days, and the constant threat of disease. Yet the quest continues, fueled by tantalizing clues. A 17th-century Jesuit missionary wrote a letter describing a large city rich in gold, silver, and jewels that he called Paititi, though the document's authenticity is debated. Satellite imagery and drone surveys have revealed the presence of large, previously unknown geoglyphs and potential man-made structures in the remote Madre de Dios region. Perhaps most intriguingly, ongoing archaeological work is continually revealing that the Amazon was far more densely populated and sophisticated than previously believed, with large-scale earthworks and complex road systems being uncovered. This new understanding makes the existence of a significant lost city in the jungle far less fanciful than it once seemed. The enduring mysteries of Vilcabamba and Paititi represent two sides of the same coin. Vilcabamba is the lost city we found, a testament to historical resilience and the painstaking work of archaeologists who pieced together clues from chronicles and pottery shards. Its story is one of a tragic, documented end. Paititi, on the other hand, remains the dream, the great unknown. It represents the possibility that the greatest secrets of the Inca, and perhaps of pre-Columbian America as a whole, are still out there, hidden by a blanket of green, waiting for a combination of technology, perseverance, and luck to finally reveal the truth. They remind us that the story of the Inca is not a closed book, but a narrative still being written with every new expedition into the heart of the Andes. But our hunt for submerged civilizations now brings us to a discovery that is neither myth nor legend, but a very real and historically documented metropolis whose rediscovery ranks among the greatest archaeological achievements of the 21st century. This is the story of Tanis Herakleion, a city that for centuries was thought to be little more than a rumor, a place mentioned by the Greek historian Herodotus and a few ancient inscriptions, but with no physical proof it had ever existed. It was the gateway to Egypt, the mandatory port of entry for all Greek trade, and the legendary site where the beautiful Helen of Troy was said to have arrived with her abductor, Paris, before the start of the Great War. And then it vanished completely beneath the waves of the Mediterranean. For over 1,000 years, Heracleion was lost. Its precise location was a mystery that baffled historians and treasure hunters alike. The breakthrough finally came in the year 2000, when after years of painstaking research, a team led by the determined French underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudiot began to survey the Abukir Bay east of Alexandria. Using sophisticated side-scan sonar and magnetometers, they detected anomalies on the seafloor. What they found when they dove down was beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Emerging from the murky depths were the colossal remains of a sunken world. Grand temples, crumbling piers, the shattered hulls of ancient ships, and most breathtakingly, monumental statues of pharaohs and queens, along with countless smaller artifacts, all lay scattered across the seabed as if a giant hand had simply swiped the city into the sea. It was a time capsule of staggering proportions, frozen in a moment of catastrophic collapse. So how does a city of such immense importance simply sink? The answer lies in the very ground it was built upon. Heracleion was constructed on the unstable Nile Delta, a region of soft clay and silt. Geologists believe a perfect storm of natural disasters led to its demise. A series of severe earthquakes, possibly coupled with a tsunami, struck the region around the 2nd century BC. These tremors triggered a phenomenon known as soil liquefaction, where water-saturated ground temporarily loses its strength and behaves like a liquid. The immense weight of the city's heavy stone temples and monuments essentially caused it to pancake, collapsing in on itself before being swallowed by the rising Mediterranean. The sea level, which had been gradually creeping up for centuries, did the rest, submerging the ruins under approximately 30 feet of water and a protective blanket of sediment that preserved them for 2 millennia. The treasures recovered from this underwater museum have been nothing short of revolutionary for our understanding of the ancient world. Each artifact pulled from the silt is a page from a lost history book. The most iconic finds are the gigantic statues of a pharaoh, a queen, and the Egyptian god Hapi, the deity of the Nile's annual flood. These monumental figures, standing over 16 feet tall, once guarded the entrance to the city's great temple of Ammon. Dozens of fragile, yet perfectly preserved, wooden ritual barges that were used in religious processions have been found, along with countless gold coins, bronze ceremonial vessels, and delicate jewelry. Perhaps the most significant discovery was the famous Decree of Size, a black granite stele inscribed with a royal edict from Pharaoh Nectanebo I. This stone slab, found in pristine condition, was the Rosetta Stone for Heracleion itself, because it clearly stated that the text was to be erected in the city of Tanis, finally proving that the Egyptian name for this port was Tanis, while the Greeks called it Heracleion. They were one and the same place. This dual name perfectly encapsulates the city's crucial historical role. Tanis Heracleion was the linchpin of trade and cultural exchange between Egypt and Greece for centuries. Before Alexander the Great founded Alexandria, every Greek merchant ship entering Egypt was required to dock here first. Its customs officials would levy taxes on goods, and its priests would sanction the trade. The discoveries in the bay confirm this vibrant exchange. The wreckage of over 60 ancient ships, from simple river barges to massive seagoing vessels, has been found, along with weights and measures from different systems, proving it was a true international port. The city was a melting pot where Egyptian and Greek gods were worshipped side by side, a place where two of the ancient world's greatest civilizations met, traded, and influenced one another on a scale we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. The silent, majestic statues now residing in museums were once witnesses to a frantic, wealthy, and cosmopolitan hub, a city that truly served as the bridge between two worlds before its sudden and dramatic plunge into the silent depths. Far to the south, in the modern nation of Zimbabwe, stands a monument to African achievement that so thoroughly defied European preconceptions that for nearly a century, many refused to believe Africans could have built it at all. This is Great Zimbabwe, the magnificent stone capital of a lost kingdom, a city whose very name means great houses of stone in the Shona language. Its soaring walls and enigmatic towers are not lost in the sense of being forgotten. They have always been known to local people, but rather its deepest secrets, its founders, and its true purpose remain tantalizingly obscured by time and a long, contentious history of colonial misinterpretation. Rising from the landscape, the ruins are a breathtaking testament to architectural genius. The most iconic structure is the Great Enclosure, a vast elliptical wall that stands over 30 feet high in places and extends nearly 800 feet in circumference, all built without a single drop of mortar. The precision of the construction is staggering. The stones, carefully quarried from nearby granite outcrops, are precisely shaped to fit together, creating graceful, curved walls and narrow, shadowy passageways that wind through the complex. At the heart of this enclosure stands a singularly mysterious feature, a solid conical tower that mirrors the shape of a nearby sacred hill. For generations, this tower has fueled speculation. Was it a symbolic grain silo representing the king's wealth and his people's fertility, a spiritual beacon for rituals, an astronomical observatory? Its true function remains one of the site's most compelling enigmas, a silent monument to a knowledge system we have yet to fully decipher. The sheer scale of Great Zimbabwe speaks to a powerful and sophisticated state. At its peak between the 11th and 15th centuries, the city and its surrounding valley supported a population of up to 18,000 people. This was not an isolated fortress, it was the heart of a vast commercial empire that dominated the interior of southeastern Africa. Archaeologists have unearthed a treasure trove of artifacts that map its incredible trade reach: fragments of Persian pottery, elegant Chinese celadon dishes, glass beads from India, and even shards of Near Eastern glass. But the most telling finds are the countless relics of gold. The Kingdom of Zimbabwe was built on this precious metal, controlling mines that tapped into rich veins running through the plateau. This gold was traded north through a network of Swahili city-states on the coast like Sofala, connecting this inland power to the pulsating heart of Indian Ocean trade, bringing wealth and cosmopolitan goods back to the court of the ruler, the Mwenai Mutapa. This glorious African origin story, however, was violently rejected by the white colonial settlers who arrived in the late 19th century. Confronted with ruins of such grandeur, they could not and would not accept that they were the work of black Africans. To justify their own occupation and dispossession of the land, they concocted a series of fantastical alternative theories. They claimed Great Zimbabwe must have been the mines of King Solomon or the land of Ophir from which the biblical Queen of Sheba obtained her gold. Others proposed it was a Phoenician outpost or a colony built by Arab traders. This deliberate misappropriation of history was used to argue that any advanced civilization must have been the work of outsiders, thereby denying the indigenous Shona people their own magnificent heritage. For decades, early excavators like the amateur archaeologist Richard Hall actively destroyed crucial archaeological layers in his quest to find evidence for these foreign builders, irreparably damaging the site and obscuring its true history. It wasn't until the pioneering work of archaeologists like Gertrude Catton Thompson in the 1930s, who conducted rigorous scientific excavations, that the evidence became undeniable. She meticulously demonstrated that the architecture, the artifacts, and the very sequence of construction were unequivocally African in origin. The pottery styles, the iron tools, the organization of the space, all of it pointed to a continuous development by the ancestors of the Shona people. Her work was a courageous act of defiance against the prevailing racist dogma, but the political damage was already done. The colonial regime continued to control the narrative for decades, even constructing a museum at the site that presented the foreign origin myth as a plausible theory alongside the facts. This fight over history made Great Zimbabwe a powerful symbol in the struggle for liberation. For the emerging black nationalist movements, reclaiming the ruins was synonymous with reclaiming their identity and their right to the land. After the nation finally won its independence in 1980, it proudly took the name Zimbabwe, making the ancient stone city the emblem of the new nation, its image immortalized on the flag and currency. This act was the ultimate rebuttal to a century of colonial denial. Yet, even with its origin confirmed, Great Zimbabwe has not yielded all its secrets. The grand stone walls we see today are likely just the elite core of a much larger city built of wood and clay that has long since returned to the earth. The vast majority of the population lived in these mud brick dwellings surrounding the stone center, and their stories are still buried, waiting to be told through more extensive excavation. Furthermore, the site is rumored to contain hidden, undiscovered chambers. The Acropolis, a complex of structures built into a steep hilltop, is a labyrinth of rooms and narrow passageways. Some researchers believe there could be sealed caves or hidden ritual chambers within this granite fortress, places that might contain the undisturbed royal burials of the Mwenai Mutapas or the ceremonial regalia of the kingdom. The use of ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies could one day reveal these hidden spaces, perhaps finally unlocking the full story of this extraordinary civilization that built a kingdom of stone and gold in the heart of Africa, defiantly proud and endlessly mysterious. While Spanish conquistadors scoured the jungles of South America for El Dorado, a parallel obsession was unfolding thousands of miles to the north, fueled by the very same desperate greed. This is the story of Quivira, a legendary city of gold that was said to lie somewhere in the vast, unknown interior of North America, a phantom that would lure one of the most famous expeditions in history into the heart of the continent and profoundly reshape the map of the New World. The tale begins not with a map but with a captive and a tantalizing story. In 1539, the Spanish explorer Francisco Vázquez de Coronado was leading a massive army through the deserts of the American Southwest, having already conquered the Zuni Pueblo villages in a brutal search for the mythical 7 cities of Cibola. His quest seemed to be a failure. The cities of gold he'd been promised turned out to be simple adobe towns. His mission was on the verge of collapse when a captured Native American man, who the Spanish called El Turco, the Turk, for his appearance, was brought before him. El Turco, perhaps seeing a way to escape his captors or to lead them to their doom, weaved an irresistible tale for the gold-fevered Spaniards. He spoke of a fabulously wealthy land far to the east called Quivira, where the ruler, a great lord named Tatarax, napped under a tree hung with tiny golden bells that lulled him to sleep. His ordinary citizens, El Turco claimed, used common household utensils made of wrought gold and silver. For Coronado, whose entire expedition was bankrolled by massive loans and whose reputation was at stake, this was the story he had been waiting for. He had to see it for himself. What followed was one of the most epic and grueling journeys of the age of exploration. In the spring of 1541, Coronado personally led a picked force of 36 of his best men, along with priests, servants, and El Turco as their guide, away from the main army and into the completely unknown Great Plains. They were accompanied by a huge herd of livestock and a large contingent of Pueblo guides who likely knew the truth of El Turco's story. For weeks, they marched across a seemingly endless ocean of grass, a landscape unlike anything they had ever seen. They were the first Europeans to witness the astounding spectacle of the American buffalo, which they called hump-backed cows, and they marveled at the sheer, empty expanse of the prairie. As they traveled, the promise of Quivira began to feel more and more distant. The Pueblo guides increasingly contradicted El Turco's directions, and suspicions grew that they were being deliberately misled. The truth finally erupted in a confrontation on the plains of modern-day Texas. The Pueblo guides confessed that El Turco was lying, that he was leading them astray into this featureless wilderness to let them starve. In a fit of rage, Coronado had El Turco garroted, strangled to death for his deception. But even with their false guide dead, Coronado's obsession was undimmed. He pressed on, determined to find something, anything that could justify his costly journey. Weeks later, after what must have felt like an eternity on the plains, they finally found their city of gold. What Coronado and his men discovered was not a metropolis of gleaming spires, but a collection of large, beehive-shaped grass lodges belonging to the Wichita people, situated near the banks of a river, likely in central Kansas. The inhabitants were skilled farmers and hunters, living in settled villages and trading across wide networks. They were friendly and generous, but they possessed no gold. Their tools were made of bone and wood, their ornaments from polished copper and simple pottery. The only metal was a piece of copper around the neck of a chief, which he said had come from a distant tribe. Coronado spent 25 days among these villagers, utterly dejected. He had them officially renamed Quivira in his reports to save face, but he knew the truth. His great quest had ended not in glory, but in bitter disappointment on the windswept plains. He turned his exhausted men around and began the long, humiliating trek back to Mexico, his fortune spent and his reputation in ruins. So why did the myth of Quivira persist for so long after Coronado's definitive failure? The answer lies in the powerful allure of the unknown and the unwillingness of those back in Europe to accept such an anticlimactic end to the story. Coronado's own reports were contradictory. He downplayed the poverty of the Wichita villages to his superiors, perhaps to avoid total disgrace, leaving a sliver of doubt that others were all too eager to exploit. Later mapmakers who had never set foot in the New World took the name Quivira and placed it on their charts, often shifting its location further and further east, each time adding new embellishments and rumors of wealth. It became a cartographic ghost, a movable feast for the imagination that migrated from Kansas to Missouri, and eventually all the way into the American South. For centuries, French and Spanish explorers would use these flawed maps in their own searches, forever hoping that the next river, the next valley, would reveal the golden city that had eluded Coronado. The real Quivira, of course, was never a city of gold. It was a real place, a culture of sophisticated Native American civilization that thrived on the plains. The Wichita and their Cadone relatives lived in complex, thriving communities with extensive trade routes that spanned the continent. Their wealth was measured in knowledge of the land, abundant food stores, and rich cultural traditions, not in precious metals. The legend persists not because there was any truth to the gold, but because it represents that moment of explosive, tragic first contact between the old world and the new, a collision of desperate ambition and a reality far more complex and valuable than the conquistadors could ever comprehend. Quivira's true treasure was the civilization that was already there, a way of life that the Spanish, blinded by their own greed, marched right through without ever truly seeing. From the sweeping plains of Quivira, we now turn to a legend that is not of gold but of land, a kingdom lost not to conquest but to the careless negligence of a single, inebriated watchman. This is the haunting story of Cantref Gwaelod, the Welsh Sunken Hundred, a fertile and low-lying territory said to have stretched for 20 miles west of the present coastline of Cardigan Bay. Unlike the grand empires we've explored, Cantref Gwaelod was a land of everyday life, a prosperous realm of 16 fortified towns protected from the ever-present sea by a massive dike and a series of sluice gates. The safety of this entire kingdom, according to the most popular version of the tale, rested on the shoulders of two princes, Tanis, whose duty was to watch the floodgates, and his more responsible counterpart, Garanhir. The legend tells of a night of reckless celebration, a great feast held in the king's hall. As the revelry peaked, a storm gathered force out at sea. Tanis, deeply drunk and distracted by the merriment, neglected his crucial post. He failed to close the sluice gates as the tide turned. The sea, finding this fatal weakness, surged through the defenses. The bells of the churches began to ring in alarm, a desperate warning that was utterly drowned out by the crashing waves and the howling wind. By the time the mistake was realized, it was far too late. The icy waters of Cardigan Bay rushed in, swallowing the towns, the fields, and the people, erasing a kingdom from the map in a single tragic night. This powerful story of a land lost to human error has been passed down through Welsh poetry and song for well over a millennium, a poignant folk memory of the sea's awesome power. The most evocative element of the legend is the enduring claim that on a quiet, clear day, you can still hear the bells of the drowned churches ringing mournfully from beneath the waves, a ghostly echo of the catastrophe that serves as an eternal warning. For centuries, this was considered a beautiful but purely poetic metaphor. However, the landscape itself began to offer up clues that the story might be more than mere fancy. For generations, fishermen trawling in the bay have occasionally dragged up strangely preserved tree stumps and trunks in their nets, far from any current shoreline. At very low spring tides, particularly after winter storms have scoured the seabed, the evidence becomes startlingly clear. The peaty sediments of the seafloor are exposed, revealing the remains of an entire submerged forest. Walkers on the beaches between Unislas and Borth can see these petrified, blackened tree roots and stumps emerging from the sand, a hauntingly tangible glimpse of a lost world. These are not just random trees, they are the remnants of a vast prehistoric woodland, with tracked pathways and human-made post alignments also identified by archaeologists, proving this was a landscape used and managed by people. So what truly happened to create the legend of Cantra Gwaelod? The answer lies in a much slower, grander process than a single stormy night. At the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago, so much water was locked up in glaciers that global sea levels were dramatically lower. The coastline of Wales extended miles out into what is now Cardigan Bay, and a great fertile plain, lush with forests of oak, pine, and birch, existed where there is now only water. As the climate warmed and the glaciers melted, sea levels began a relentless, creeping rise. This wasn't a sudden event, but a slow-motion inundation that unfolded over thousands of years, gradually claiming the land. Ancient Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who lived on this plain would have watched their hunting grounds and freshwater sources slowly vanish, forced to retreat eastward again and again over generations. The final submergence of the last vestiges of this forested plain likely occurred within the last 4,000 years, well within the era of human memory and storytelling. The folk tale of the drowned kingdom is almost certainly a cultural memory of this very real geological event, compressed from a millennia-long process into a single, dramatic narrative that could be easily remembered and passed down. The character of the negligent watchman, Tanis, provides a simple human cause for a disaster that was actually an inevitable force of nature. This interplay between legend and geology makes Cantra Gwaelod a uniquely relevant story for our modern era. As climate change accelerates global sea level rise, the story of this sunken kingdom transforms from a tale of the past into a potent allegory for our future. The same processes that drowned the forests of Cardigan Bay are happening again today, threatening coastal communities worldwide. In a fascinating twist, these same rising seas and increased storm activity that pose a threat are also periodically revealing more of the lost landscape. Severe storms have been known to strip away tons of sand from beaches, exposing even more of the ancient peat beds and preserved tree stumps. sometimes even revealing the footprints of prehistoric animals and humans preserved in the once soft clay. This creates a paradoxical situation where the very force that hides the evidence, the sea, can also temporarily unveil it. Modern technology is also joining the hunt. Scientists and archaeologists are using sonar mapping and LiDAR to meticulously chart the underwater topography of the bay, creating a detailed picture of the drowned world. Their surveys have identified what appear to be artificial structures, including a long, seemingly man-made causeway, fueling speculation that the legend could be rooted in the fate of a specific, later prehistoric settlement that was finally overcome by the waves. The enduring mystery of Cantra Gwaelod lies in this beautiful convergence of poetry and science. It is a story that connects us directly to our deep past, to the ancestors who witnessed their world change irrevocably and encoded that trauma into a powerful, lasting myth. It reminds us that the landscapes we see as permanent are anything but, and that the sea holds secrets of human history in its depths. The legend endures not because we expect to find a drowned prince or a golden bell, but because it speaks to a universal truth about our relationship with the natural world, a reminder of our vulnerability and the profound, lasting impact of environmental change, whether caused by a forgotten duty or by the slow, inexorable turning of the planetary climate. Even with all our modern tools and relentless curiosity, why do so many of these magnificent places remain stubbornly out of reach? The answer is a complex puzzle, a combination of nature's formidable defenses, human obstacles, and the simple, humbling limitations of our own technology. The challenges are as diverse as the lost cities themselves, creating a global game of hide and seek where the playing field is often actively working against us. First and foremost is the sheer, overwhelming power of environmental change. We've seen how rising sea levels slowly claimed Pavloptri and Cantra Gwaelod, and how a single cataclysmic earthquake and tsunami sent Helike and Port Royal to a watery grave. But what about the opposite force, the relentless advance of the desert? The story of Iram and the real Ubar shows us how sand can be a perfect preservative, but also a perfect shroud. In the Taklamakan Desert, the same sands that mummified the inhabitants of Lulan and Nia also buried their cities, and these dunes are constantly on the move. A site meticulously mapped one year can be completely reburied by a single major sandstorm the next, forcing archaeologists to start their search all over again. The jungle is no less aggressive. The Amazon and the Mosquitia region of Honduras don't just hide ruins, they consume them. Thick roots pry apart ancient mortar, seasonal floods deposit layers of silt, and rapid vegetative growth can swallow a stone pyramid in a matter of decades. The city of the Jaguar was found not because its structures were visible, but because the team had to literally cut their way to it with machetes, proving that nature is often the most effective guardian of its own secrets. Then there are the very human challenges of politics and conflict. Imagine knowing the approximate location of a lost city but being utterly unable to visit it. This is the frustrating reality for researchers interested in sites within politically unstable regions or active war zones. The ongoing conflicts in the Middle East have made detailed archaeological work in parts of Syria and Iraq regions brimming with undiscovered history virtually impossible and incredibly dangerous. Similarly, the highly sensitive political situation in Xinjiang, China, where the mummies of Lulan were found, makes securing permits for foreign expeditions extremely difficult. Beyond outright conflict, there are also issues of preservation and cultural sensitivity. Many potential sites lie beneath modern cities or on privately owned land, making large-scale excavation financially and logistically prohibitive. And for indigenous communities, the location of sacred sites is not a mystery to be solved for outsiders, but a piece of cultural knowledge to be protected. The quest for knowledge must always be balanced with respect for the people for whom these stories are not legends, but a living part of their heritage. Perhaps the most intriguing challenge is the limitation of our own perception. For centuries, explorers like Percy Fawcett searched for a single, stone-built city in the Amazon because that was the only model of civilization they understood. They were looking for another Rome or Athens, and when they didn't find it, they concluded nothing was there. It took the revolutionary eye of LiDAR technology to peel back the canopy and reveal the truth. Not a lone city, but a vast, interconnected network of garden settlements and earthworks, a completely different and previously unimaginable form of urbanism. Our own preconceptions can blind us to what's actually there. We search for towering pyramids and gleaming temples, but the most common building materials for ancient peoples were wood, mud brick, and thatch, materials that decay and return to the earth within centuries, leaving behind only the faintest traces. The most widespread lost cities might not be hidden at all. Their remains might be all around us, invisible because we haven't known how to look for them. Finally, there is the simple, daunting scale of the task. The Amazon basin is roughly the size of the contiguous United States. The Sahara Desert is larger than the entire continental US. Searching for a city, even a large one, in such an immense expanse is like looking for a single specific needle in a warehouse full of haystacks. Traditional ground surveys are painstakingly slow and can only cover a tiny fraction of such vast areas. While technology like satellite imagery and LiDAR have been game changers, they are not magic wands. They require clear weather, specific flight paths, and enormous amounts of data processing. They can show us tantalizing anomalies, but someone still has to strap on their boots, venture into that unforgiving terrain, and dig to confirm what the lasers saw. It is a slow, expensive, and often disappointing process. The lost cities remain lost not for a lack of trying, but because the earth is vast, time is deep, and the clues are often frustratingly subtle, waiting for the perfect combination of technology, perseverance, and pure, blind luck to finally bring them back into the light. Yet for all the power of epic tales and ancient maps, the real breakthrough in our search for lost cities hasn't come from a lone adventurer with a machete, but from a silent revolution happening in laboratories and orbiting high above the Earth. We are living in the golden age of rediscovery, armed with a suite of technologies that would seem like pure magic to explorers of the past. These tools are allowing us to peel back layers of jungle, sand, and water to see the ghostly outlines of civilizations we never knew existed. The undisputed champion of this new era is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine being able to strip every single leaf from every single tree in a vast rainforest with the push of a button, revealing the naked earth beneath. That's essentially what LiDAR does. Mounted on aircraft or drones, it fires millions of laser pulses toward the ground. These pulses penetrate the smallest gaps in the forest canopy and bounce back from the solid ground below. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, a computer can build an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional map of the surface topography, effectively rendering the vegetation invisible. This isn't just theory, it's how we made the stunning discovery of vast, interconnected urban networks in the Amazon and the hidden valley of the city of the Jaguar in Honduras. These weren't just a few scattered mounds. LiDAR revealed sprawling complexes with highways, reservoirs, and terraced agriculture, forcing us to completely rewrite the history of the Americas. It showed us that what we once thought was pristine wilderness was actually a managed, engineered landscape, home to millions of people. The technology is so powerful that archaeologists are now reflying areas that were surveyed just a decade ago with newer, higher-resolution systems, and they're finding even more detail, suggesting that our current maps are still only showing us the tip of the iceberg. But our view isn't limited to the green veil of the jungle. Eyes in the sky are also scanning the world's deserts. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar are the tools of choice in arid environments. Companies like Digital Globe capture incredibly high-resolution photos from space, and archaeologists have trained algorithms to look for subtle anomalies in the soil, slight discolorations or changes in texture that betray the presence of buried walls or roads. This is how researchers identified the potential location of the lost city of Ubar, the inspiration for Iram of the Pillars, by tracing ancient caravan routes that converged in the Omani Desert. Similarly, in Egypt, satellite surveys have identified over 3,000 potential ancient settlements buried beneath the sands of the Nile Delta, sites that would have taken centuries to find using traditional methods alone. These technologies allow us to conduct broad, non-invasive surveys of immense areas, letting the satellites do the exhausting work of narrowing down the search so that archaeologists on the ground can focus their efforts precisely where it matters most. Beneath the waves, a parallel technological revolution is underway. The discovery of Tanis Heraclean wasn't a matter of luck. It was the result of systematic underwater survey using side-scan sonar and magnetometers. These tools create detailed acoustic images of the seafloor and detect metallic anomalies, allowing teams like Frank Godio's to pinpoint ancient shipwrecks, fallen statues, and the outlines of buildings buried under centuries of silt. Now, even more advanced tools are taking over. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROV, and autonomous underwater drones can now dive to depths that are too dangerous for human divers, staying down for hours to conduct meticulous surveys and high-definition photogrammetry. This process involves taking thousands of overlapping photographs that software then stitches together into a perfect 3D model of a site. This is how we can now excavate a sunken city digitally, studying every artifact in situ without ever disturbing the site, preserving it perfectly for future generations. These underwater drones are our proxies, venturing into the abyss to bring back crystal-clear data from the deep, turning what was once a murky, dangerous guesswork into a precise science. So what does the future hold? The next frontier is already emerging, and it lies not just in seeing what's there, but in understanding what it all means. Artificial intelligence is being trained to scan these massive new datasets, the LiDAR maps, the satellite photos, the sonar readings, to recognize patterns that might be invisible to the human eye. An AI could potentially compare the layout of a newly discovered city in the Amazon to all other known archaeological sites in a database, instantly identifying architectural similarities and suggesting cultural connections or trade routes that would take a human researcher a lifetime to piece together. We are also developing more sophisticated ways to see underground without digging. New generations of ground-penetrating radar and muon tomography, which uses cosmic rays to create X-ray-like images of large structures, could one day allow us to peer inside the Great Mound at Great Zimbabwe or map the hidden chambers beneath the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, revealing their secrets without ever lifting a trowel. These tools are transforming archaeology from a science of careful, localized digging into a global, interconnected effort to understand the human story on a planetary scale, proving that the greatest adventures no longer require a pith helmet, but a powerful processor and an unquenchable curiosity for the world we thought we had lost. And behind every one of these lost cities there is a person, a singular individual consumed by an idea, driven by a map only they could see, often to the very edge of sanity and beyond. This relentless pursuit is the human engine of discovery, a story not just of places but of the people who simply could not let them remain forgotten. Perhaps no one embodies this obsessive quest more perfectly than the British explorer Percy Fawcett. A decorated military man and a respected cartographer for the Royal Geographical Society, Fawcett was no reckless amateur. He was a meticulous man of science, hardened by years of surveying the treacherous borders of South America. But during those journeys, he became captivated by fragments of evidence, a worn Portuguese manuscript, whispers from indigenous guides, and his own discovery of ancient pottery in the jungle. He became utterly convinced that a vast, sophisticated civilization, which he codenamed simply Z, lay hidden deep in the uncharted Brazilian rainforest. He envisioned it not as a small village, but as a monumental city, the capital of a lost world. In 1925, armed with this conviction and funding from a skeptical but fascinated public, he embarked on his final expedition with his son Jack and Jack's best friend, Rolly Rimmel. They vanished without a trace, becoming one of the greatest exploration mysteries of the 20th century. Fawcett's story is a tragic one, but his legacy is complex. For decades, he was seen as a cautionary tale, a man who chased a mirage and paid the ultimate price. Yet, with the recent LiDAR revelations of vast Amazonian settlements, his intuition has been posthumously vindicated. He was looking for a city of stone in a civilization that built with wood and earth, but he was right about the scale and sophistication of what was there all along. His obsession, which once seemed like delusion, now looks more like prescience. Of course, the drive to find these places isn't always pure scholarly curiosity. For the German businessman Heinrich Schliemann, the search for lost cities was a means to an end, a way to prove his worth and to literally touch the myths he adored. Driven by a lifelong obsession with Homer's Iliad, Schliemann amassed a fortune and then used it to pursue his boyhood dream of finding the city of Troy. Unlike methodical archaeologists, Schliemann was a force of nature, a romantic who believed the epic poems were historical fact. He went to Turkey, identified a large mound called Hisarlik as the site, and began digging with a fervor that would make modern archaeologists shudder. He used dynamite and massive trenches, bulldozing through millennia of history in his single-minded quest for Priam's Troy, and then he found it, or at least a version of it. He uncovered a spectacular hoard of gold and jewelry he dramatically dubbed Priam's treasure, and in doing so, he proved to the world that Troy was not a legend but a real place. Schliemann's methods were destructive and controversial. He likely destroyed as much history as he uncovered, but his unshakable belief and his willingness to spend his own fortune revolutionized archaeology. He showed that the great myths of the past could have a foundation in truth, inspiring a new generation to look at ancient stories not as mere fables but as potential maps. What fuels this kind of all-consuming dedication? For some, it's the thirst for academic glory, the chance to have their name forever associated with a world-changing discovery. For others, like the Spanish conquistadors hunting for El Dorado, it was naked, raw greed, the dream of limitless wealth and power. But for many, the motivation is more personal, a deep-seated need to solve a puzzle that no one else can solve, to answer a question that has haunted them since childhood. It's a form of romance, a love affair with the unknown. These explorers trade the comforts of home for disease, starvation, hostile environments, and the profound psychological weight of absolute solitude. They face the constant threat of failure, not just as a professional setback, but as a total, personal obliteration of their life's work. The legacy they leave is a complicated one. They are often flawed heroes, egotistical, reckless, and sometimes culturally insensitive, yet they expand the boundaries of our knowledge. Their stories, both of triumphant discovery and of tragic disappearance, continue to captivate us because they speak to a fundamental human urge, to see what's over the next hill, to unravel a mystery, and to prove that even the most enduring secrets of the past are not forever beyond our reach. They remind us that history is not just found in books, it's buried in the earth and waiting for someone with enough courage or enough obsession to go and bring it back into the light. These ancient whispers of forgotten worlds do more than just tantalize historians and archaeologists. They seep into the very bedrock of our culture, fueling our stories and shaping our dreams. The allure of the lost city is a powerful narrative engine, one that has driven countless tales of adventure, danger, and revelation across every medium we have. Think of the crack of Indiana Jones's whip as he races through booby-trapped temples, or the determined glint in Lara Croft's eye as she deciphers an ancient map. These characters are our modern-day proxies, channeling that same insatiable curiosity that drove real-life explorers like Percy Fawcett into the unknown. They embody the romantic ideal of the lone adventurer, armed with knowledge and grit, staring down both natural and supernatural forces to uncover a truth that will rewrite history. This genre taps directly into our collective yearning for a world that still holds mysteries, suggesting that just beyond the next mountain range or beneath the next wave, a discovery awaits that will fundamentally alter our understanding of who we are and where we come from. This fascination extends deeply into the interactive realm of video games, where we don't just watch the adventure, we live it. Franchises like Uncharted and Tomb Raider are masterclasses in virtual archaeology, placing us directly in the worn boots of the explorer. The gameplay loop itself mirrors the real-life process of discovery. We follow fragmented clues, solve environmental puzzles based on ancient engineering, and finally emerge into a hidden valley or a sunken chamber to gaze upon a breathtaking vista that no one has seen for centuries. A game like Horizon Zero Dawn takes this concept even further, building an entire post-apocalyptic world where the Old Ones and their miraculously advanced yet lost civilization are the key to saving the future. These digital worlds satisfy a primal urge for exploration and grant us agency in the narrative, allowing us to feel the thrill of that pivotal moment of discovery for ourselves. They answer a fundamental question: what would it feel like to be the first person to lay eyes on a lost world? Games provide that visceral, first-hand answer. Beyond pure adventure, the Lost City motif serves as a versatile canvas for our deepest fears and highest aspirations. It can be a warning, as in the story of Atlantis, a parable about hubris and the fragility of even the most advanced society in the face of nature's wrath. It can represent a longing for a utopian ideal, a place like Shambhala, where humanity has achieved perfection and waits patiently for the rest of us to evolve. In science fiction, the trope is often reskinned as the lost colony or the derelict starship, but the core mystery remains identical: what happened here? What brilliant culture flourished and then vanished, and what can their fate teach us about our own path? This reflects a profound aspect of the human condition, our drive to seek out patterns and lessons from the past, to find meaning in the rubble. We look at these empty spaces and we see not just empty buildings, but cautionary tales, inspirational peaks, and sobering reminders of our own impermanence. Ultimately, the enduring power of the lost city in our imagination is a testament to the magic of the unanswered question. In an era where satellite maps show every inch of the planet, these legends preserve the thrilling possibility that the age of groundbreaking discovery is not over. They remind us that history is not a closed book, but a living, breathing story with missing chapters still being found. They speak to the optimist in us that believes there are still wonders left to find, and to the dreamer that longs for a world more mysterious and magnificent than the one we know. Every time we pick up a book, watch a film, or boot up a game centered on this idea, we are participating in a timeless human tradition. The celebration of curiosity itself, and the unshakable belief that the greatest adventure always lies just beyond the known horizon. From the legendary Atlantis to the very real, sunken ruins of Tanis Heraclean, our journey across continents and centuries has taken us to 30 of the world's most captivating lost cities. We've stood in the shadow of Petra's rock-hewn facades, swam through the silent streets of Pavloptri, and ventured into the deep jungles where the city of the jaguar guarded its secrets. Each story, whether born from ancient scripture, the desperate greed of conquistadors, or the slow, inexorable forces of nature, represents a unique thread in the vast tapestry of human history. What unites them all is that beautiful, elusive blend of myth and history, where a kernel of truth grows into a legendary tree, its roots anchored in real events and its branches reaching into the realm of pure imagination. These places are more than just collections of stone and pottery. They are powerful symbols of our ambition, our fragility, and our insatiable need to leave a mark on the world that endures long after we are gone. This enduring human drive to explore the unknown, to solve the great puzzles left behind by our ancestors, is what propels us forward. It's the same spark that compelled Percy Fawcett to vanish into the Amazon and that guided Frank Godio's hand to pull a colossal statue from the sea. It's a quest fueled not just by a desire for gold or glory, but by a profound need to understand our own story. Every crumbling wall and every sunken artifact is a question posed across time, challenging us to listen, to dig, and to discover. With every technological leap, from the first ancient map to the laser precision of LiDAR, we peel back another layer, finding that the line between fable and fact is often thinner than we ever imagined. The search itself becomes a testament to human curiosity, a never-ending conversation between the past and the present. The story doesn't end here. In fact, it's constantly being rewritten. What was once considered mere legend is now a confirmed archaeological site, and the mysteries we've discussed are just a fraction of those waiting in the world's remote corners. Perhaps you're fascinated by the spiritual promise of Shambhala, or maybe the tragic, watery fate of Kantra Gwaelod resonates with you. The conversation is just beginning, and we want to hear your voice in it. Dive into the comments below and tell us which of these lost cities captures your imagination the most. Do you have a theory about the fate of Atlantis or the true location of the lost kingdom of Paititi? Share your own favorite stories and legends. This is a community built on a shared wonder for the mysteries of our world. If you've enjoyed this expedition into the forgotten chapters of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. The map is never complete, and the next great discovery is always just waiting.